Hey everyone, welcome to TechstrongTV. Today is Tuesday, June 28th. We've got a great lineup of TechstrongTV for you. Let's dive right into it. First of all, immediately following our introduction here, I'm going to continue with the kind of new way we've been doing the news, and it's a little bit different news. It's industry-wide news, not just what's on our websites, DevOps.com, Container Journal, Digital CXO, Security Boulevard. So stay tuned for that as soon as we wrap this. After that, though, I've got a really nice interview. I caught up with my friend Niladri Chaudhary. Niladri is the founder CEO of Corelogix, the people behind the DevOps India Summit, the upcoming DevOps Asia Summit in January. But today, Niladri is going to tell us about two new services that Corelogix rolled out. One is called Playground, the virtual dojo, and the second is Leadex. Is also, you'll hear both about them in the interview. Two excellent stuff. Niladri's a real innovator out there in India and Asia in general, and always a pleasure catching up. Also, DevOps India Summit is coming the end of August. That's at DOIS.com, I believe. Or maybe it's .io, but it's DevOps India Summit. After that, I have an interview with my friend Ariel Asaral. Ariel is the CEO of Corelogix. They just announced a $142 million round. It's not really the focus of it, but just to give you an idea of the kind of traction they're getting. You know, when I first met Ariel and he told me about Corelogix, I just felt like it was something that was needed. The idea of doing analysis on the fly at the edge or wherever the data is, it just had to catch on with the increasing costs in cloud and everything else. So, it really works into automation. I think Corelogix is a great model. Anyway, we catch up with Ariel. He's going to tell us all about what they're doing there around vulnerability issues and threat detection, incident response, etc. Okay, next up after that, we're going to start giving you some of our content that we streamed live over at RSA conference in San Francisco back in early June. In this one, it's actually Mitchell and I sitting down with Jennifer Chapowski of Target, who does an amazing job with their DevOps, DevSecops team. And then, surprise guest, we pull in the one and only Ira Winkler, and we talk a little bit about API security, DevSecops. It's a rollicking, great conversation. I hope you'll enjoy it. Also, if you weren't at RSAC and didn't get a chance to see our DevSecops event, I think it was our 7th annual DevSecops event, it was an amazing lineup of speakers, an amazing bunch of sessions. You can check it out. Go to TechStrong Group or TechStrongEvents.com and look it up. And you can register. It's for free. We're replaying the whole thing on July 12th. And you can see the sessions then. Don't miss it. They're really good. But this panel, just in the middle of Broadcast Alley, came out great. I hope you'll enjoy it. After that, we're going to go back to something old a little bit here. And this is Mike McCulley, Field Director at SNCC. And he's talking about Know Your Code, Open Source and Supply Chain Summit. And it's mitigating risks in software supply chain security. I know we're going heavy on this, guys, but both at the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit last week and RSA conference the month before, it seems like software supply chain and software supply chain security is the hottest thing out there. So, if that's what you want to learn about and hear about, we've got lots of great content on it. After that, we have an interview, actually two interviews with Charlene. One is with Aneka Gupta, who's the Chief Product Officer at Rubrik. And Rubrik was also a big presence at RSAC. But we're going to hear more about them with Charlene. And then Charlene has a conversation with Dan Lorman. Dan, who's he's the Field Chief Information Officer, Security Officer at Presidio, but also one of the most well-known prolific bloggers in the cybersecurity space. So that's a great conversation Charlene has with Dan as well. Check it out. And then from there, we're going to jump to some Analyst Corner where we have Mitchell with two videos. One is regarding an announcement out of IBM to spin up on-demand ZOS systems running on IBM Z hardware, and what this means for market. Mitch is going to talk about that. And then Mitch has an interview with Tim Estes, CEO at vArmor, who joins Mitch at, this is again from RSAC, about why security companies already are, but don't know it or must become data companies. You know what? It's all about the data. So that's Mitch. And then we have a view with Mike Vizard. Mike talks with Nabil Bukhard, CTO, Chief Product Officer at Extreme, and how digital twins will transform how IT is managed. We've been hearing a lot about digital twins. That's a good conversation with Mike. So that's what we have in store for you. A little bit of RSAC there, a little software supply chain security, digital twinning, mainframe, just a great all-around technology here on TechstrongTV. We're going to take a quick break. I'll be right here with the news. Hey everyone. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we've moved to a little bit of a new format here to give you tech news on TechstrongTV. We have our team looking over headlines, not just on our sites, but across the entire spectrum of tech, to try to bring you some stories or highlight some stories that we think are of interest to you. So we're going to give you a couple today, and hopefully you'll find them interesting. The first thing I wanted to bring up was, it seems Lithuania, country in the Baltics, was hit by a cyber attack. State and private institutions were hit by DDoS attacks. The reason I looked, DDoS, run-of-the-mill garden DDoS attacks, of course, are usually not front-page news. But because Lithuania is in the Baltics, on the front lines there in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, I think we're all sensitive to any kind of cyber attacks in the region, whether they come from Russia or allied countries or in fact from others. Is it the start of a wave? Is it an isolated incident? I think at this point we don't know. But when we start getting countries in this region victims of cyber, we wonder, if this conflict is spilling out to other areas, to other countries. Lithuania has been a big supporter of Ukraine. So something to bear watching, and we'll see what happens there. Speaking of governments and cyber attacks, both the Department of Homeland Security and Treasury have agreed to assess the need for a federal response to cyber attack insurance. Look, there's arguments to and from cyber insurance, ransomware insurance, cyber terrorism. Some people will tell you really shouldn't do business without it. Others will tell you there's not a policy that's worth its salt. As usual, the truth is probably somewhere in between. but it's good to see the Government Accountability Office calling for an assessment on this. I think the whole idea of cyber insurance, while it's been around, I remember when Aon came out with the first policies maybe 20 years ago, 18 years ago, that I remember. It's been around at least since then, and it's still a somewhat cloudy type of situation there. So that is what it is. Next up, we have Beyond Identity joins GitLab's Alliance Partner program for cyber. So GitLab, is a platform, and they've started their alliance partnership as is the way of the world in tech companies. And the good folks at Beyond Identity, we've featured them a bunch here, have my friend TJ Jermolak's company. They've joined the alliance partnership with GitLab. We'll be partnering there. I suspect we'll see a lot of companies partnering with GitLab in this alliance partnership because they have a great platform. Next up, coming out of the UK, GearSet raised £45 million. And they're a tool provider for Salesforce. The reason I highlight that is, hey man, I know the economy's getting tough for tech companies out there. We're seeing smaller rounds. We're seeing it harder to raise money. It's good to see a company raising, a substantial amount of money like that. And congratulations to them. Next up, again, we had another company hit by cyber attacks. Again, seems once a day, but this was Wilshire Farm Foods, a ready meal food company. They were hit. And then I think the next big piece of news speaking of cyber attacks in countries, it seems that an Iranian steel company had a halt production recently regarding a cyber attack. I don't have any information where it came from or anything else, but it wouldn't be the first cyber attack against Iran or Iranian companies, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever the case may be. But, we are seeing cyber warfare play out on a global scale here. So that's where that is. Just wanted to quickly cover some news on our own sites, DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, as well as Container Journal and Digital CXO. A new survey came out, by the way, on DevOps.com about alternative cloud service providers gaining ground. So it'd be and this, by the way, was a TechStrong research project and survey. So good work to Mitch and Dan and the team there. I think what's interesting about this one is that we are seeing, maybe beyond the big three and beyond the AWS hegemony of new cloud providers, which would not be a bad thing. So it's a good article. Check that out. ServiceNow is now adding Lightstep notebooks to visualize observability data. That's kind of new for ServiceNow to get in the hardware business. There's a trend now. That's like the second or third company I've seen jumping in the hardware space. So interesting there. Next up, over on Security Boulevard, new sophisticated spyware coming out from Hermit, which is what the world needs. The House passed an ICS Cybersecurity Training Act, which will hopefully broaden the ranks of cybersecurity folks to fill all those jobs we hear about. Other great news on Security Boulevard, by the way, that I would check out. Security Boulevard publishes about 40 or 50 articles a day. So it's hard to give them all here to you in 10 minutes, but do check out Security Boulevard. Over on Container Journal, 4 CNCF projects for key management. Keys and secrets are becoming increasingly important, and you should check those out. So we have a great article on tips for stateful Kubernetes backup and recovery. I'd highly recommend that to you. And then finally, over on Digital CXO, we have a new article out today for you to check out. Consumerization and digital transformation. Is your enterprise agile enough? And this is a question I've heard from many executives. They're a little bit agile. They do, they're still doing waterfall, fast waterfall, and, going back and forth on it. That's where we are. So do check that out, as well as all of the other great information and content on Digital CXO at digitalcxo.com. That's the news for today. Let's get on with the rest of our interviews, and we'll see you soon.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another TechstrongTV interview. I'm really happy that you're joining us today. I am joined by a good friend of mine who lives over in India. I've had the pleasure of meeting him in person several times, usually in Singapore. It's Niladri Chaudhary from Excelentro. And I probably mangled it, but I did the best I could. Niladri, welcome to TechstrongTV.
Thank you, Alan. Nice meeting you.
Absolutely. So, Niladri, in spite of all the times of us speaking, and we speak pretty regularly, I've never actually had you as a guest on TechstrongTV. Why don't you, if you don't mind, share with our audience a little bit of who you are and Excelentro and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Alan. So, my name is Niladri Chaudhary, Dr. Niladri Chaudhary. And I have been in the IT industry for 32 plus years. I am the CEO of Excelentro India and Excelentro Singapore, and chief organizer for the global event on DevOps, DevSecops, SRE. And we partner with TechStrong Group for this event. Last few years, because of pandemic, it has been virtual, but it's all started physical, and hopefully next year we'll get back into hybrid. And this year we are also extending another event, the DevOps Asia Summit, which will be hybrid, and physical location will be Singapore.
Absolutely. And let me just clarify for the audience. The first event you spoke about is known as DOIS, DevOps India Summit, and it's probably the largest India-based DevOps conference. Last year, which was, again, because of COVID, virtual only, I think there were 6,000 or 7,000 people for DevOps India. Yeah. For DevOps India Summit, and that was a virtual only. This year, DevOps India Summit will again just be virtual only, I believe. And what was the dates on that, Niladri? Do you know?
26th August, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. India time.
There you have it. You could do the calculations for your part of the world of India time compared to whether you're in the US or Europe or what have you. And Niladri, while we're on the subject of DevOps India Summit, for people who want to get more information, or maybe are interested in registering for it, it's a great event. What's the website?
DevOpsIndiaSummit.com is the website to go.
Absolutely. Good. While we're on it, let's take care of all our housekeeping. Now, you mentioned the new event that you have coming next January, and that's a hybrid event, in person and online. I'm hoping to be there in person in Singapore. It's January 12th, and that's right. DevOps Asia Summit, DOAS.
Right.
And for people who want to get sort of an early view of the summit and perhaps register for in-person or hybrid, what's the website for that one?
DevOpsAsiaSummit.com.
Excellent. All right. We've got that out of the way. Let's dig in now a little bit, Niladri, to the content and some of the things you are planning, both around the summits as well as part of Excelentro about it. Okay? Take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. So, a couple of things that I got to understand and realize after interacting with the experts, the global experts throughout the world, and also getting some mentorship from Alan and similar other people. What we have started is that with, again, TechStrong research, we are doing a research, and this research is focused on the relationship between the customer and the service provider in the digital transformation today. And we hope to release the report on 26th of August in the DevOps India Summit. So that is one of the new initiatives. But today I wanted to talk about two specific things which we started, which is unique and not there as of now anywhere. One is the playground. It is the virtual dojo. I called it playground because children goes to the playground to play, right? So we expect the practitioners of DevOps, DevSecops, SRE to come here and play. So the dojo concept came into the DevOps world because DevOps, the third principle, is about continuous experimentation and learning. If we don't experiment, if we don't try out new things, we will not learn anything new. And when the target brought in the dojo concept, it was a huge place. Everybody is supposed to come under one roof and then try an experiment. But what I felt is that today the workforce is not just in one place. People are working from different parts of the globe. And with the pandemic, people are working even mostly from home, hybrid model and all this. So everybody is not going to be in office every time. So keeping that in mind, I felt that we need a virtual dojo to work with. And that's how it all started. So we have created a platform where a team can come with their business problem. We will help them to hypothesize the problem and experiment it in our platform. This is not a standard course where you go through certain modules. This is not a standard course where you have a set of predefined labs. This is absolutely on the basis of what your business problem is. And for that, we have partnered with some of the tool vendors because we need tools to experiment it. Like, for example, we have DFactor for the DevSecops area. We have Mavericks.ai, which is into the ASOC, that is application security, orchestration and correlation. We have Gremlin for the chaos engineering. We have New Relic for the observability. We are already having digital.ai for the value stream management. Now, these are aspects which people needs to learn and implement it in their environment and see how they can solve problems. For example, people today are monitoring, but they want to move into observability. They can come with what is their environment, what are they doing, and we can create that kind of an environment and help them to implement it. Now, they do it hands-on. And they learn hands-on, they take it back. We do not want any delivery activity to go on. That's why we have restricted it to an 8-member team. And maximum people should be there is 3 months, which itself I feel is quite a lot. Shouldn't be more than a month or two. And it's a pay-as-you-go model. So that's where Playground is. And I don't think there is any such environment which is available today.
And that it sounds great. And I just want to be clear, no matter where you're watching this, right, this is available because it's all online and it's available to anyone. This isn't if you're just in India or Singapore or what have you. I just want to reemphasize, people who are interested in this in Playground, where do they go, Niladri?
Playgrounddojo.com.
playgrounddojo.com, and dojo, of course, is DOJO.
Right.
I love it. Good stuff. Next, you said there was something else.
Yes. The other realization that I had was we practitioners go and learn from various organizations. For example, Alan's DevOps Institute, we go and have the certifications and do things. But where does the leaders go? I haven't seen leaders going anywhere to learn, but they also need to learn. Today, IT is no longer a cost center. IT is business.
Mm-hmm.
And today, I feel that we are no longer technology leaders. We are business leaders, and our objective is also business objectives. It is also true that we are getting into a kind of evolutionary situation because customers do not know what they want. New requirements are coming. They want pay as you go. They want servitized product, as I call it in my book that I released last year, Adapting to Industry Infinity, New Ways of Working for IT Services. Now, servitized product, like today, we don't take a taxi service from Uber. Uber provides a travel experience. We don't buy a CD for listening to music. So we don't buy a song. We buy a musical or entertainment experience from Spotify.com. So that's why we are not just interested only in the song, but the entire journey. Say for Uber, we are interested in the journey from the time we book the cab till the time we pay and get down. Now, when things are changing so much, when technology is changing and we don't know what is going to come tomorrow, wearables, Meta, whatever new things are coming, NFTs and all, it has to be an evolutionary process. And people have to think from the point of view of innovation. And innovation is not a thought process which is going to be only with a handful of people. It has to come from the leadership and percolate down to the developer level, at every level. So this course we created, curated specifically for the leaders to be able to adapt and adopt the new ways of working that is required to be successful today. So we start with innovation mindset. We talk about various things in innovation, even to the extent we go that IT has the knowledge of the entire journey of its customers. So if they can use that insight, process it and think from a business point of view and provide that insight, if possible with AI and ML, to the business, they will be able to deliver better features which will be useful. Like as Microsoft has created a white paper which says only 1/3 of the features are liked by customers. 1/3 is neither liked or disliked, and 1/3 is disliked by customers. So are we going to look at a 33% probability of something which might be liked by a customer, or should we try to improve it? So it starts from there. Now, innovation has to be done keeping in mind the needs of the customer. And that has to be a collaborative approach where we both work together, which we will co-create value. And in that, we are talking about the design thinking aspects. Moving on, so this is the why. And now we come to the what, which is about the product mindset, moving from project to product approach, all these kind of things. We are then moving on to the how. That is where we tie the DevOps, DevSecops, SRE, value stream management, how those helps in achieving that innovation and how to utilize the collaborative effort, the hypothesis-based development, and so on. And finally, we have to maintain it and we have to scale it. That's where comes is the operational excellence. And that's where we are talking about continuous security. As Mark Hornbeck says, you cannot do continuous delivery without continuous security. And along with that, we are talking about platform engineering, because for scaling, the platform engineering and the value stream team comes together in a very good way. And added to that, I have added two more points, which is very important in today's world, which I've taken from my book. One is human capital. Human beings are not machines, so they are not resources. They are capital. So we have to treat them in the right manner. So that has to change. And finally, we have to give back to our planet. So sustainability. So this is the whole program, which is consisting of, if we do physically, it is 3 complete days. If we are doing online, then we are doing it on 12 sessions of around 2.5 to 3 hours, 2 sessions per week. At the end of this, you get a 3-week capstone project where the facilitators will spend 2 hours per week to guide the teams. So during the course, we will identify certain areas which the team is going to try and implement whatever they learned, submit a project report, and based on that, the completion will be done. So this is what is another new thing, because today, if you look at even the big universities and all, if you look at the typical leadership courses, it is more to do with general management or things like behavior, team building, coaching kind of things. But this is specific to how we are going to enable with IT and with this changing kind of scenario.
I love it. You know, I got to tell you the truth. I'm blown away by the comprehensiveness of this, and you know, we live in a world where everyone makes up their own titles, right? There's, you know, everyone doesn't fit into the same boxes that we were used to over our time. But I think every leader or person aspiring to leadership needs this kind of background. Niladri, for people who are interested, again, the name of the program and where they can get more information.
It is called Leadex, and the site is leadex.excellentro.com.
Can you spell Leadex for me?
Leadex, Leadex.
Got it. You know, especially our digital CXO audience, this is something really right up from there. Maybe we can get some information on a digital CXO with that. What a great thing. And Niladri, you know, I want to make sure people out here realize your experience, your reasons for doing the Playground Dojo, for doing Leadex, for the DevOps India Summit and the DevOps Asia Summit isn't just some Johnny-come-lately to this space, right? Give people, if you can, a little bit of a flavor of what Excellentro is about and its scale.
Sure. So Excellentro is about consulting and training, and specifically focus in the area of new ways of working, using approaches like DevOps, DevSecops, SRE. One of the reasons for this is I believe that today what I see is silos not created by organization design, silos not created by tools, but silos also created by frameworks. And we need to break those silos created by framework by adopting an approach where we don't hold on to any specific framework, but use whatever is necessary, the good of each of the framework, stitch it together and achieve the business value that we are trying to get.
Excellent. Excellent. And for people who are interested in Excellentro, can you spell out the domain for that?
Sure. Excellentro. Excellentro.com.
Excellent. Hey, Niladri, I appreciate, you know, we're recording this, but it's late at night on your end. I appreciate you staying up and doing this with us. Thank you for all the information. Thank you for all you're doing. Look forward to partnering with you on both the DevOps India Summit and the DevOps Asia Summit. And I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully in January in Singapore, if not before.
Sure, I'm looking forward too.
Okay. We're going to take a break here on TechStrong TV. We'll be back in a moment.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecops, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on TechStrong TV. I'm really happy to be joined by my friend Ariel Asraf from Corelogix. Ariel's been on the show before. You may be familiar with Corelogix. But hey, Ariel, welcome. Welcome back. How are you?
Great. Thank you very much, Alan. Great to be here again.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So we were talking a little off camera. You're up in New York,
Yes.
my hometown. So happy to have you joining us from there. But why don't you share with our audience a little bit? What are you doing up in New York? What's been going on with Corelogix?
Yeah. So we finalized our round about a month ago. We've announced our D round of $142 million, co-led by Brighton Park Capital and Advent International. The announcement was the 1st of June, and I came here to New York to meet a few clients and also to meet our new partners here. Make sure we're aligned and in sync. So we're planning our next growth phase here in Corelogix.
That's fantastic. So Ariel, I'm familiar with Corelogix, but not everyone watching this may be. We should really start there. Let's give them a little background. What's Corelogix about?
Yeah, so Corelogix is the first in-stream analytics company. Basically what we've done, we looked at the market and we understood that the ability to store and then analyze data for observability and security is becoming prohibitively expensive and basically impossible in terms of performance. So we're looking at medium-sized companies generating tens of terabytes a day, and we came up with Streama, which is our engine that allows to analyze all data before it's ever stored or indexed. So whether it's anomaly detection, machine learning models, aggregations, dashboards, live stream, alerting, everything comes from the stream. And in that way, we give our customers better performance, better scale, but ultimately better cost. We're talking about more than 50% reduction. In these times in the market, I think a lot of companies are looking at their spend and they're looking at their cloud spend, they're looking at observability spend. And observability and security come out of the cost of goods. They're actually affecting the core unit economics of the business. And Corelogix is helping there, and this is why we've seen so much growth. And on the heels of that, we've done this D round now.
Fantastic. First of all, congratulations on the round. We were talking a little off camera. It's interesting times right now, and the fact that you're able to raise this kind of number in these times, I think, is a testament to the underlying business and technology that you guys have developed there at Corelogix. So, congratulations on that. Talking of the underlying technology and so forth, look, I think SplunkConf was this week, right? And they announced they're getting into the hardware business. I don't think anyone jumps into the hardware business lightly, right? Hardware is a very different animal than software. Yeah. But the fact that they are, I think, is testament to them making the realization that, data is getting really expensive, right? We went through a period where, data storage, let's not even get into the analysis, analytics piece of it, just pure storing the data, compared to where it was, let's say 10, 15 years ago, became very, very cheap. But like everything else in technology, right? As that availability increases, so does then the use of it, right? It's like, I used to have a hard drive on my machine. I remember having a computer. I got a 40 megabit hard card. This is back in the 90s. And I said to myself, 40 megabits, what am I going to do with all that space? I'll never use it, right? I can't use a machine today that doesn't have a terabyte.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast. You got a gigabit of bandwidth. It's like, what are you going to do, gigabit of bandwidth? I was selling T1 lines, right? But yeah, throw some videos on there and we start using it really quickly, right? So it's the same thing with data. Yes, data got cheaper, but so did the amount of data we have.
I think it became like the fuel of businesses, and people understand that if you don't make smart data-driven decisions, you're going to be, first of all, in terms of maintenance and performance, in terms of security, but also business decisions and marketing decisions, and even manpower decisions have to be powered by data and by actual analysis of that data in a way that lets you make proactive decisions. And so companies are understanding that for their business, that's the most important component, and it's part of the cost of doing business. But then it's very hard to really separate the important data from the non-important data. You got to store everything. That's the most expensive part, because you got to start, first of all, by indexing and storing and categorizing everything inside your storage. And only then you figure out what to do with it. So once we flip that architecture and first of all, figure out what's the importance of data, what can you do with it, detect on that data, we only store a small portion of it. And that lets customers really get better coverage and also get more proactive insights and more stability.
Agreed. Absolutely. So I don't want to minimize the analysis aspect of what you're doing, right? Because if your business says we analyze here so you store less and you got a lot and that's the savings, that would be good. That's good. But it's really, if that analysis isn't great, the money I'm saving on storage is nonsense, truthfully, right? And so I want to make sure we emphasize that with the audience, which is, yes, it does a great job of saving you by doing it on the fly, so to speak, right? But it's also the quality of that analysis that I think is
when you do
distinction.
Analysis on the fly, you get better analysis by definition. You get shorter latency, you get better coverage for the data, and you can do stuff that you can't do with the storage. So for instance, Corelogix can alert on a single event if that particular attribute within the event was not present in the data in the past 90 days. Okay, so every single event, we check an attribute against 90 days back and tell you whether it's new or not. So if you think of a storage-based analysis platform, if you try to check that against every event and check 90 days back on a distinct attribute, you just crash the cluster entirely. So there's the only way to achieve that level of analysis is with real time. Also, you think of storage-based analytics, there's a single point of failure. If the storage crashes, if the index crashes, nothing works because everything pulls from there. And Corelogix works in a streaming manner. So there are different stations and services. No one is a single point of failure. Even if alerting is down, okay, which is terrible, of course, but still, anomaly detection is going to be up. You're going to view the data live. You can query it from your archive. You're going to get the live stream of data to analyze. Even if the storage component, your archive is down, you're going to still get alerts. You're going to still view dashboards. And so when you look at the distribute character of streaming analytics, it's more than just, cost saving, like you mentioned. It's better stability and performance, and it's better analytics altogether. Now, also cost is directly related to the level of analytics that we provide, because cost is prohibiting customers from getting coverage. So what we found out is that it doesn't matter how rich your company is and how big it is. Everyone has a budget, okay? And no one in the world has proven that he knows how to plan the budget for data growth. So what happens is that they plan a budget for next year, but data grows so exponentially that they start cutting data parts. So they're saying, okay, I have $1 million, $2 million to cover the data. And I'm taking into consideration 50% of data increase. Suddenly comes a unit and says, hey, we got to analyze this. That's another 5 terabytes a day. And they're starting to think, how do we fit it into the budget? Do we break the budget? And giving them a product where companies are planning for 2 million and we're coming in at 700,000 suddenly, they're like, wow, we can grow this data 3x. Now they actually start thinking of new use cases. So for instance, we went into one of the largest communications companies in India, and they had a budget that they were planning for all their application logs. And we came in and we cut that budget by 2/3. So what they did, they did not put that money in a deposit. What they've done is, well, why not bring the CDN data and the network data and the server data? And now we have this full picture. We never imagined we can do that. So they're using the same budget that they've allocated, only now they get real full visibility into everything that's happening and all their user experience.
Excellent. And you know, that is just so right, man. You and that's what I was trying to get at earlier. You plan for 50% data growth and you wind up with 90 or 120% data growth. And there goes all your plans. The best laid plans of mice and men, you know, done. Sariel, this is great. You know, it's a lot of money, but what about in terms of product improvement? I don't want to use the word roadmap. It's such an old word. But, you know, new features, new capabilities you guys are thinking about. Anything you could share?
Yeah, so actually big stuff. We're not talking incremental changes in the product. So first of all, we've expanded. We used to be a logs product, and then we've slightly added metrics and a bit of SIEM. Now it's a full observability platform. We do logs, metrics, tracing, and security, all based on the Stream platform that analyzes in Stream and then is able to directly query from the customer's own archive. And then for the security piece, we built a separate business unit called Snowbit. That's basically an independent unit within Corelogix that runs on its own budget with its own leadership. We brought a senior leader that was director of all startup business APAC in Japan for Amazon, and the CISO of Annapurna, one of Amazon's company, because obviously a lot of our customers run on Amazon. And we need and they're going to run that. They're running that unit with already quite a few big customers that are coming in. And what's special about it is going to do SIEM, network security, cloud posture, and also it's going to give services to our clients, because we found that a lot of the fast growth companies are struggling with knowledge. So they get a lot of security tooling, but then you ask them, well, you've invested so much in tooling. Is your security better? What do you feel about it? And many of them feel like, well, we don't know what to do with the alerts. We don't know how to analyze the data. So we're giving them those services to deploy, to secure, and even to give them the initial response and concierge that they need to remediate security issues. So the biggest thing I can say about product is full stack observability, logs, metric, tracing, security, APM, and Snowbit, the separate security unit that also provides expert services and our security resource center.
Excellent. I love it. Hey, man, I'm sorry, but we're about out of time. We talked a lot off camera.
Yeah.
But we're going to have you back on. We spoke about some things I want to follow up on. Ariel, you know what we didn't tell people? Corelogix. It's Corelogix.com. Can you spell it? I'll spell it.
Corelogix.com. Coralogix.com. Check it out. And there's a bunch of case studies and even a product demo under resources if you want to see it.
That's what I needed. Hey, man, thank you. Congratulations again. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Alan. Great to be here again.
All righty. Ariel Asaraf, CEO, Corelogix, here on TechStrong. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Hey everyone, we're back here live at RSA Conference. We're in a broadcast alley in Moscone West, just grabbing some friends. Walking around though, well, we had to schedule some stuff. But you know, one of the things we wanted to do live this week is a live at RSA version of our DevOps Unbound video series. And just a quick shout out to our friends at Tricentis, continuous testing leaders, dynamic testing, for sponsoring Unbound. But they're not here, it's RSA. But we are lucky to have who is here, and let me introduce you to them. To my immediate right is Jennifer Chaplesky. Jennifer, if you've never seen her present, is a DevSecops rock star. And she presented yesterday at our DevSecops Day event here at RSA, and really laid out the success. And it's not all success, let's not sugarcoat things, it's hard. But the program that she's led at Target and a lot of the progress they've made, and it's phenomenal. And what's even more phenomenal is that she's able to share that with you, our audience. So that, by the way, if you weren't here live for that, we did record it, you'll check it out. But Jennifer is joining us today. To Jennifer's right is, if you're a security person, this guy needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'll embarrass him a little bit. Well, it's hard to embarrass Ira, but my friend Ira is one of the most renowned security researchers, authors. He's worked for various companies. He's here keynoting. He's actually on his way into a keynote, and we pulled him off the floor, right? Literally.
Snagged him.
We snagged him. He's hooked up, and he's here to talk. Ira, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And then Ira's right, of course, my co-host for Security Unbound, my partner, CTO here at Techstrong Group, Mitchell Ashley. Mitchell, thanks for coming on.
Always, you bet.
And let's jump right into it, because everyone's pressed for time.
Yeah.
So, DevSecops. Jennifer, the very first time you presented at our DevSecops thing, I think the jury was still out on, is it a thing? Is it real? Can developers work with security? Right? Can we stop stupid, in Ira's language, right? But as you showed yesterday, we've made real progress, right? We have, off camera here is our friend Rich Mogul from Firemont. You can't see him. You know, Rich has been working this problem for 6 or 7 years too with DisruptOps. How do you get developers to be smart about security? And it's not that developers aren't smart. Let's be clear, developers are smart, but how do we get them caring about security? How do we get them involved there? Jennifer, I'm going to let you kick it off.
Yeah, well, I think the question being, can we work together, is we can and we must. I really think it's the best way to solve some of the security problems that we're facing. And so the way that we've approached developer partnership is the fundamental belief that developers want to build secure applications. They want to. So we are here to equip and enable them to build so in a way that is easy for them to do, easy for them to understand what good security looks like, easy for them to measure when they've done it successfully.
Excellent. Ira, thoughts?
So what she said is like critical, you must. And one of the problems I keep telling people in cybersecurity as a whole is basically when everything's a should, you should all over yourself. And the problem is when you look at DevSecops, security should be embedded in everything, because you don't want to, there's the old expression, building it in instead of bolting it on. That was back in the 90s.
Yep.
And with DevSecops, the problem is in the whole development organization, this even goes back to schools, where you have people teaching software engineering, but why isn't secure software engineering embedded in software engineering? Why isn't security embedded in database management courses? We have a separate course on that. There should not be a separate course. There should always be security embedded in it, and saying that we're going to constantly, have a cycle of DevOps where we're taking software, writing it and pushing it out as we're writing it to have constant latest, greatest, without having security in, is like, and it should be a should. No, again, you're going to should all over your customers.
Right.
You know, whoever uses this, and you've got to make sure that security is embedded, and that has to be a must. That has to be, you know, it's like people say, you can't force people. You should force people into making sure security is embedded. And if they want to go ahead and do this CI/CD, more acronyms, but CI/CD and constantly pushing out updates, you need to go ahead and ensure security is embedded as not a bolt-on, but something that all the security developers are aware of, integrate into their process, and make sure it's there from the start, not as an afterthought.
You know, we had Allison Miller here yesterday for CISO Talk, and we were discussing her particular background. She's the CISO with Reddit, and she has a product management, software, security. My perspective is, agree with what we said. I think the other part of it isn't just embedding security people into software. It's helping security people understand enough about software, learn enough, don't have to be developers, but know about software architecture. Why is cloud native? What the issues around securing that? What do we need to know? API security. It's not just another protocol to protect. What about is APIs and their growth and how we're using them and how applications are built that are relevant? So I think there's a complement to both. Let's embed some software knowledge into security engineers. You don't have to be experts, but just same way with security people.
Yeah, because I mean, going back on something, everybody, you know, people get mad at me when I say cybersecurity is generally not an entry-level position, because I don't look at, you know, I mean, securing something is important, but for example, you don't want to have somebody who's never administered a system be responsible for security of that system. You know, the best people I've ever seen who are security people have worked as admins on systems and taken it that way. And likewise, you know, I think we should be pulling these software developers and saying, you've been a great software developer. Now let's have you learn some of the nuances of security. And that's the key fact. A lot of security is a nuance of the whatever the job is. Secure data, I guess. I don't know anybody doing database management as their job title anymore, unfortunately. But that's my failing. But, you know, embedding security, like here's how you test the security of a database. That should be, again, somebody who's been a database administrator, knows the ins and outs, somebody who can speak the language of that person. And the problem when you say security should be entry level is that you're taking away the ability to speak the language walking in, because you do need to influence people to be more secure, but you can't influence them if you don't have the trust. And that's a critical aspect that people are missing. And same thing with DevOps. It'd be great to take DevOps people and then give them the security nuances so they can go back and integrate that all together.
I can build on that. So when we were at Target, I have a team of folks who are working in DevSecops. Half of them are developers who just happen to be working in security, just like there could be developers who happen to be working on a supply chain product. And so being able to have that translation and really understand how to speak with our customers.
Unfortunately, those are rare birds who are tough to keep in the cage. Right? I mean, because they're in high demand. But here's the real issue, and I'm listening to all three of you. DevSecops, or whatever you want to call building security into your development process, it cannot be optional. It can't be, oh, I want to be one of the cool kids on the block and maybe do that. Or I think we should do that. No, it's not should. It's not cool. It's a necessity. It's a mandatory. It's not optional. And until we recognize that, you're going to have some people who do it right, like you're doing with your Target team and other companies we see. And you're going to have a lot of people who don't, because if it's an option, you know, nice to haves never win. No. It has to be a must have.
No, I guess security, I mean, sorry, I'm taking this a little bit higher.
Go ahead.
But security people, we are such losers. I mean,
Ira, we're at a security conference.
We're at a security conference, but we tend to be like, my focus has been on the human aspect.
Right.
And we're like, I listen to the people in the awareness. We want to empower the users. We want to give but if a user does, think about it this way. If a CFO ever walked into a board meeting and said, we lost $40 million yesterday, but, it was a user, they made a mistake, we can't blame the user. The CEO would say, you're right, we can't blame the user, we blame you because it's your responsibility for ensuring there are no $40 million errors in the financial process. In cybersecurity, somebody ruins the network by downloading malware. It's like, oh, we can't blame the user and we can't blame me as the CISO and stuff like that. It's like
it's a blameless culture.
It's a blameless culture, and the problem is we want to put responsibility where it belongs. I'm not saying you fire users for mistakes that are legitimate, but if you, for example, have blatant policy violations, for example, somebody watches porn, they are fired, no questions asked if they are detected. Somebody, however, downloads ransomware while trying to do things that are outside of policy or something like that. It's like, well, no, if it is a spear phishing attack, you don't necessarily blame the user. Right. You kind of blame the organization around them for not saying, hey, what is this guy doing? We should have data leak prevention. We should have anti-malware and a whole bunch of other layers. But the question is, do we take away our policies and procedures from people and not enforce them because, we don't want to blame the user when they're doing blatant violations of policy? If there's blatant violations, we need to hold them together. And going back to DevSecops, there should be policies, procedures. There should be step-by-step guidelines and procedures in how you embed security into development. And I'm not saying you blame them if there's vulnerabilities, because there's always basically a vulnerability just happens to be a bug that creates security-related issues. And if there are vulnerabilities, that's fine. They happen as long as they adhere to our processes. If somebody embeds, going off slightly off topic but related, if somebody violates privacy in a bad way, the company could be fined, depending where they are, put out of business. Sorry, I'm ranting. I'll give other people
No, it's all good by me. So, look, I don't pretend to know everything about Target's DevSecops program. Everything I've learned from watching you present. But, certainly you've taken this approach of embedding the security into this DevOps team, into the development teams as well. And some of them are security people doing development, some of them are development people doing security. And it's that kind of cross-pollination, if you will. It's not like we're breeding superhumans who are developers and security
we followed
people.
You, we know where you're going.
But, it's that cross-pollination that I think gets to the heart of where we need to be. We can't be so specialized. Look, I just do development. I can't worry about security, right? Because those kinds of people, they're the first ones to go extinct, right? When you're too specialized like that.
So I'm just gonna, no development person should say, okay, I need to get my development out. Security's like, good security or good development embeds security.
Absolutely, I agree.
And nobody should be out there in any other IT profession that doesn't think it's embedded. There was one time I was on a panel, and this one panelist, he was from some managed security service provider. Not going to mention the name.
Nameless, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Nameless company.
We don't want any privacy violations either, or lawsuits.
And this company's tagline was, "Security's not your job, so let us do it." And this was a CISO forum, and I have very little threshold for bullshit. And after the second time the guy said his company's tagline, security's not your job, so let us do it, I was like, in the first place, we're at a CISO forum. It literally is in their job title. In the second place, everybody has a security responsibility.
That's the key piece of this
Whether
whole
or
thing.
not they're the CISO or whatever.
Or they're
I
the
totally
developer.
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's
Yeah.
the key.
The words that we use internally are security is a team sport. And I don't mean just me or just you or just your team, but like working collaboratively to make sure that we're building secure systems. We're doing all the things that people are saying to try to really embed it and make it the easiest way to do your development job is to do it securely.
Yeah, and just for example, I like analogies. Let me use the analogy of a football team that just passed to mind. What happens, you have on offense, you have the quarterback throw the ball, he throws an interception. Guys running back, you don't have the whole offense stop and say, oh, we're offense. That guy's running the ball. He's now on offense. I'm not defense. No, everybody all of a sudden shifts to the focus on where they need to. Well, hopefully they do.
Right.
Everybody focuses is like, we got to tackle that guy. Whoever it is. Even a kicker sometimes gives this half-hearted attempt to tackle. But, you've got to make sure there's more, that it's part of their job, whether or not they want it to be.
Agreed. Guys, I wish we could talk all day here,
We
but
could go a long time.
we could go a long time with this. I don't know how much time we have live.
17.
Okay, so we have a few more minutes we could talk about. Jennifer, you're the DevSecops expert here. Had an interesting conversation earlier with another security company that shall remain nameless. And, the whole shift left thing came up. And I said, well, we can't shift left at the expense of shifting right? Because this is something I've observed just sitting in my seat here, which is we put so much emphasis on doing better with developing secure code to the detriment of like our nuts and bolts security stuff, right? Like the block and tackle, the stuff we've been doing. And that, hopefully we do better all the time. And he looked at me like I had two heads, right? And I'm going to ask you, because you're a DevSecOps leader.
Yeah.
What about the whole shift right? What about, let's not throw out the good stuff because we're concentrating on the new stuff.
I'm a big fan of shift everywhere.
Okay.
Left is nice. If you find things earlier, they're cheaper to fix.
Yep.
You can, more easily prevent things. But the way that I like to approach it is, that infinity that we use for delivery, it's all of them. There has to be some sort of security capabilities to look while you're developing code, while your build processes are executing, while you're running in production. And so that's probably,
The right
I like shift left, but I really think it's got to be
we
everywhere.
shift everywhere.
Yeah.
I think we substitute dump left for shift left.
Yeah.
It's not about the developers are going to do all this for us. And now just like we said, we didn't need ops. Now we don't need scale. That's all been disproven. That's not what it means, right?
Ira, do you have an opinion?
Surprisingly, I do.
Okay.
So the whole concept of shift left is almost offensive to me.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, so shift left, for those of you, and all of a sudden people made up this whole concept of shift left, or they started adopting it, and they don't even understand where they adopted it from. Shift left is a military counterterrorism strategy where you have boom, and it's the science of boom. Boom is the point of an attack. Left, if you look at it on a timeline, sorry, you're looking at it this way, but left is on the timeline, the events that lead to the terrorist attack. And right of boom are the events that are the response and reaction to it. And when I look at that and apply it to cybersecurity, we have protection, detection, and reaction. Some of the people have, protection, detection, reaction, response, resilience, whatever. It's still protection, detection, reaction. Left of boom, right of boom, boom. Left of boom, boom, right of boom. And when I hear people do this, statistically over time, I saw some vendor document that was unprotected on the internet. I'm not going to name the vendor, but they did a private study that found that 80% of budget is spent on protection. Left of boom. Already left of boom. Then they only spend 20% on detection and reaction. That's way too little. So to say fundamentally companies say shift left, It's like, guys, you've already wasted so much money on shift left to the detriment of, as she said, detection and reaction and constant improvement. And now the whole concept of moving it to DevOps, the fact, oh, well, now instead of spending lots of money
on prevention.
In this case, like DevOps is kind of bad because the concept of shift left in DevOps is bad because it's implying we didn't even think about security at the beginning.
Wait, are you saying we did?
No, I'm not saying we did. I'm saying
Okay.
it's acknowledging.
Right,
We
it's
didn't
acknowledge.
even think.
But maybe it's time we acknowledge our past sins.
Right, but we have to start looking at it as a comprehensive way, saying, guys, why did we totally ignore security in the first place when it's the opposite of where security has been in our other actual cybersecurity disciplines? And now we're doing this like it's something special, like it's a buzzword. It shouldn't be a buzzword. It should be, I don't like shift left because it implies we need as a buzzword to encourage people.
But this goes into the whole DevSecops thing.
Yeah.
Do we need a word DevSecops, or isn't it just DevOps? Because security's part of it, and why only security people massaging their ego needed to put the sec between Dev and Ops.
That's
It
why
was
we've had
already
trouble
there.
defining it, right?
Yeah,
It was already there.
It should have been there. It
But it
hasn't
wasn't.
been.
Okay.
But
Fair enough, yeah.
whatever it takes to do it, I just don't like I don't like it. I don't like a good concept that should have been there in the first place as a buzzword.
Yeah.
And shift left is a marketing buzzword. that
Okay,
should be,
but let me back up. We are at RSA. If there's ever been a place for security buzzwords, there's a new one every year. So this year it's zero trust. How many times, if I had a drink for every time I've heard zero trust here, I'd be drunk all day.
Pickled.
Right? We are an industry of buzzwords and shiny trinkets, and have been for as long as I'm coming here.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing that we are. The problem is, what do we do in practice?
So you want to say what we want to be?
I want to say what we should stop and be doing now. Because good organizations like hers are doing it now. She has thought of this long before somebody came up with the concept of shift left. If I'm not mistaken.
Right.
She is doing everything and has been doing things right. Then somebody comes to me, zero, we have zero. In the first place, I don't think half the vendors who sell zero trust know what it means.
That's
But why is that changed? How many vendors sold NAC when we were doing NAC?
Who knows what it was?
So anyway, sorry, we could go on forever. I'm trying to
problems in security. This is a problem in security.
Do it to ourselves.
Yeah, we
you
are.
triggered me. I could be right.
I triggered. I don't want to trigger it. Guys, we're gonna wrap up here, but because we got to move on. We've got people in the wings. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you not only for being here, but for all the years that you've presented at our DevSecops thing. Consistently, people come up to us and say, you know what, the woman from Target,
Oh, that's great.
she's a rock star.
Oh, thank you.
True.
So
you do. Yeah.
it really is. And I can't tell you thank you enough for that. Ira Winkler, man, you're a gift.
Yeah. I know how to rant. What can I say?
It runs. It's the
And my books are good rants too. Cheap plug. So anyway.
newest book.
Security Awareness for Dummies.
Absolutely. We did an interview on it recently, but check that out. Mitch, you want to take the last word?
Yeah, I think this is the debate. This is the conversation we must have, right, about how we take security seriously and not buzzword it to death and market it to death. Let's get real. Let's get real about it.
I would I don't think we're actually debating anything.
No, I think we're all in violent
I think we're all in
agreement.
violent
This is who
agreement.
we
The
are.
only thing we're doing is ranting about the lunacy of buzzwords at this point.
Yep. All right.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yep.
Sarah.
Many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring us on DevOps Unbound. We're live at RSA. We'll be back with DevOps Unbound, I guess, in about 2 weeks. But until then, we're going to take a little break now. We'll be back in a moment.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I am Mick McCulley. I'm a field strategist at Sneak, and excited to have this overview of this session this afternoon, looking at mitigating risks in software supply chain security. So I'm your host. I'm going to spend the next 30, 40 minutes or so walking through some of the details, and we'll drill into a lot of the different areas associated with the supply chain and the supply chain security. From an agenda's perspective, what I wanted to do is to slice it into a few different areas. And some of this is to create the foundation, make sure we're all talking about the exact same thing. And so if you look at our discussion points that we're going to walk through, one of those is we're just going to start with the foundation, right? Why the software supply chain, right? How did it come to be? What is it? What is this thing that we're actually talking about? We'll jump into some of the details actually defining what is the software supply chain, make sure that we're all talking about similar vocabulary, similar ideas associated with it. After that, leveraging those two starting points, what we can start to do is to get into the discussion of why the security of the software supply chain security, or the software supply chain. The security piece is definitely an area that's been brought to the headlines just recently, and we'll talk about some of the reasoning behind that. With that in mind, we'll start to delve into some of the details, get into what are those risks, right? When you look across your organization and your software supply chain, what are the areas that you should be concerned with? Investigate, make sure that you've got the proper strategies in place in order to ensure your organization isn't susceptible to some of these areas. And then the last one is we'll get into some of the details of what can you do, right? What are those steps that you can take inside of your organization to help mitigate those risks? So that's an outline of what I wanted to talk with everybody today. Without further ado, we can jump into some of the details. In order to start talking about the software supply chain, the software supply chain security, what I wanted to do was kind of level set everybody of why are we talking about this, right? What's brought it to the headlines and the spotlight? And in order to do that, if we take a step back a little bit and talk about not only where we are today, but even look, within the recent past. And one of the things that I have up here is actually it's a quote. You may have heard this, you may have not. It's a pretty prominent quote. I know that's been used for quite some time, and you may or may not realize it, but the quote of "software is eating the world" is actually over 10 years old. Mark Andreessen actually, in an essay in the Wall Street Journal, penned an essay specifically talking about how he foresaw, right, the fact that applications and businesses now leveraging application was starting to take over the world. The interesting part to me is 10 years ago, the foresight that he had associated with it was extremely accurate. And even at the time, it was arguably ahead of his time. When I looked into it, when he wrote this essay, Uber was literally just publicly launching their application in San Francisco. It wasn't until a couple years later that Uber Eats was considering, or DoorDash was considering and testing trials of food delivery. And even just a few years prior to that essay, Google had come up with this unique concept of my locations inside of Google Maps, allowing users to pinpoint their exact location. Over the time span of when that was created to where we are today, I don't think there's probably much room for argument to see how much of a digital society that we've become. There are many daily activities, actions, what I'm doing today that's based upon software applications. And it's not just the end user consumption of those, but when you start to look at critical infrastructures, the basis behind large financial institutions, the power grid, modern cars, self-driving cars have applications built on top of them. Internet of Things, a lot of these revolve around the software associated with those. So we've seen a fairly significant evolution and the adoption of applications across every aspects of our society. And in some instances, especially when you start looking at healthcare and medical devices, there are life and death implications associated with understanding what those are and the risks within them. With that in mind, what I wanted to also do was, again, back up just a little bit further and talk about, well, why? Like, how did we get here? And I, dating myself a little bit, I'm old enough to know of what like original applications look like, how organizations created those. And from a historical perspective, this is what it entailed. You had organizations, if they decided they wanted to create an application, they had their group of developers. They were all within their internal perimeter inside of their network writing the code. The code itself resided inside of their network, their organization. They had IT operations individuals that collaborated with them. The developers would write the code. They would then build it onto servers. The IT team would take those applications, deploy them into their infrastructure that they managed and controlled, all within this nice little confined perimeter. So the exposure was a little bit smaller. If you fast forward to this rapid acceleration of applications and software across organizations, it's changed significantly, right? What was historically this hard, fast sort of perimeter arguably has completely disappeared if there's any aspect of it. You look at the developers inside of an organization, they may or may not even be physically present. They could be even outsourced. But even more than that, that process for creating those applications had changed drastically. And it's turned into this large ecosystem of many different outsourced third-party interactions and sources and tools in order to streamline those processes and take advantage of the fact that you can create applications, deploy them in an extremely fast way, and stay competitive in the market and be able to reap the benefits of all of those efficiencies and what the software and applications give you. This is why this ecosystem, why we're starting to talk more and more about that software supply chain. It's all of those details. So knowing that, let's get into a little bit of the core. What is this software supply chain, right? We just talked about that ecosystem, but let's drill into some of the specifics so we can identify all of those areas. I'm going to use a little bit of analogy, and again, just to, it's a little rudimentary, but the idea is to level set everybody of what we're talking about. And the easiest way to think of a supply chain is just to look at it from a physical perspective. This is something that's existed for years, and it's easy to grasp all of the components. And so if you look at a manufacturing supply chain, you can easily start to identify it's made up all of the raw materials, the components, some third-party suppliers, processes, employees, everything that's required in order to actually take raw materials and components and create something that's delivered to your end consumer. When you look at all of those areas, there's some details within them too that also become somewhat intriguing. Raw materials, pretty self-explanatory, right? This could be steel, plastic, just the raw materials used to create it. The suppliers, however, may actually be bringing you components, pre-made elements that you're using in order to build your final product. An interesting aspect of that is those suppliers have their own supply chain. So when you start to look inside of some of these processes, you start to see this nested sort of element. If you look at how you take those components, you use your internal employees, they use tools, right? Those tools are created by someone else. You look at the manufacturing process. In some of the more advanced manufacturing, there may be automation, machinery, robotics. Those products may actually be created by a whole nother company, which has its own supply chain. And so you start to get this visualization of how all of these components have these nested components inside of it. And with that visualization, here's one of the other things that I wanted to kind of point out and use as leverage when we start talking about the security and risks associated with these supply chains. If you look at this physical supply chain and you look back historically and start to think of incidents where understanding what occurs here has become critical. There's different sort of examples of when you can start to say, okay, it makes sense why we focus on this and understand some of those details. And I've got a few examples, and one of them is geared towards, there was a, in 2006, there was an E. coli outbreak actually with some infected spinach, some tainted spinach. It was, the FDA, the CDC started investigating these illnesses that were occurring in the upper Midwest. Within a short amount of time, that we were able to isolate that these individuals that were getting sick had eaten spinach within that same time frame, and they were able to hone that into the restaurants that they were served from, and then slowly, and actually not even slowly, fairly quickly, they were able to figure out those restaurants had a distribution mechanism. That distribution mechanism got the packaging and the information from this particular manufacturer supplier, and even able to trace that back, looking at details that the manufacturer had captured to the originating farm and the time frame in which all of those that spinach was harvested. In those cases, this was there were health considerations, risks associated with it, and being able to trace that back to understand the implication and how much exposure was part of that was an extremely critical aspect of understanding that supply chain. You can look at many different examples of something very similar. I'm assuming many individuals that may be listening to this right now have probably encountered some sort of a recall associated with the vehicle they were driving. Same sort of thing, right? There was some sort of identification of some safety mechanism, some risk inside of their automobile, and it was traced back to the originating reason, addressed, and all of the fixes were then brought back to all of the individuals that were affected by that, because they had the understanding of what risks were delivered for very specific sorts of targets, right? Like what automobiles were affected by that. I use all of these analogies because what I wanted to do now is actually take that same concept, but into the software world, right? Into the digital realm. And if you look at software and that creation process, it mimics, right? The supply chain, that ecosystem that we talked about before, mimics very closely that same sort of physical structure, the difference being it's digital. And when you break it apart, it's still the exact same thing, right? It's the materials, the tools, the platform, the people, the processes that all go into the idea of an application until it's actually delivered in whatever form or location that it's consumed in. When you look at a modern application, right, the ones that we're talking about today that are leveraging these extremely fast processes in order to take these ideas and concepts, deliver them to consumers, get feedback, iterate on those, make improvements, and continuously evolve. All of these modern approaches are leveraging something probably similar in what you're seeing here on the screen. And it's broken out into some different areas. I'm going to start on the left, and then we'll go into some of the details as we traverse it to the right. The developers being, probably the origination of a lot of those ideas. And those are individuals, right? They are writing the code themselves. The developers are leveraging tools in order to perform that process. Tools like IDEs, even arguably their desktop that they're writing that code on. Those developers are also creating, within the industry, there's been the adoption of open source. So you start looking at the open source libraries, these building blocks, where they don't have to recreate code every single time they want to create a new application or modify an application. Containers have been an element that's been adopted in any modern sort of software application development process. The ability to have reusable, repeatable delivery devices, self-contained operating systems that developers can build upon, that streamlines the process of delivering those applications out, right? Again, you being used from outside entities in order to help streamline and capture those efficiencies. The code stored and shared inside of a Git repository, typically something that's licensed and gathered from another third party. The process for actually taking the ideas, collaborating amongst multiple developers, bringing those together, building them, right? Compiling the application, putting the components in place, testing the application, make sure it's functioning as it should, ensuring that you're covering all of the code with those tests, looking at security risks associated with it. The build process has turned into a full ecosystem in order to facilitate that in a much more effective manner. And so within that is an entire ecosystem where, again, outside tools are leveraged in order to automate those, all the way to the point where the entity, right, the final artifact is stored in some sort of storage before it's delivered to the consumer. I spent that time talking about these elements because all of this makes up that software supply chain. Everything from the entities like the open source libraries, containers, the developers, the IDEs, to the code repositories, to the processes that are used, including all of those third-party dependencies and resources. All of those make up that software supply chain. With that in mind, right, and knowing that we're all talking about the same thing, let's talk about why are we focusing on this, right? What's brought it to everybody's attention? And some of this is probably fairly obvious. It's making headlines, right? We're seeing this, make some fairly global headlines in some cases, depending upon the attacks. But why? Why are there attacks on those supply chains? And if we start to investigate and look at why there are attacks on those supply chains, you can start to put them into a couple different buckets and categories. One of the reasons why the software supply chain is getting attacked is it happens to be one of the weakest links. Organizations creating these applications are definitely spending time, focused energy on securing the application itself, runtime, anomaly protection, but sometimes overlooked is the process in which that's actually created. And if you haven't spent the time and resources putting all of the security controls associated with the process, it becomes an easy target for attackers. The second one, which is actually a very intriguing one itself too, is the fact that you have this idea of attack once, infiltrate many. And you could even describe it as a cascading attack. These we're also starting to see. And this is an interesting area that's intriguing from an attacker perspective, right? The return on what you invest on the attack can be tremendous. And if you can think about this in a few different ways, right? And if you look at it from a military perspective, you could directly attack your enemy, right? Another army, if you will. Or you could take another approach and maybe attack their supply chain, like where they get their resources, their information, in order to disrupt the effectiveness of that group of individuals. But you can even take that a step further. And instead of maybe that supply chain, right, how they're getting the information to those, or getting the resources to those troops is guarded fairly heavily. And maybe you could take a step further and go a little bit more upstream. And if you think about, ammunition is extremely critical for, armed resources. And so if you go to the supplier of where they actually make that, and maybe you could tank the gunpowder, right? Like let's go replace all of that with, cinnamon or something that's not effective. And all of a sudden you've been able to attack something extremely far upstream that's going to have implications much more broad. You also could start to look at this as attacking, multiple sort of locations. If you took an example of automobile manufacturers, let's say you have a dispute, you for whatever reason, you're angry with every single automotive company in the world. You could go individually and launch attacks against all of those, or you could start to hone in on, well, maybe there's something similar between all of these. They use these robotic welding equipment inside of their manufacturing facilities. And you're able to identify that, a lot of them use very similar equipment. And so if you target and focus an attack on that, you can then use that attack in order to infiltrate and execute the attack against multiple organizations simultaneously. This is more of an example of a cascading attack where you can infiltrate once and attack many. That's some of the reasons why attackers are looking at this, right? It's not only, can I go find the weakest link and attack this particular organization, but can I execute attack that also has broad sort of spectrum results? Gartner's also looked into this as well. When you look at the supply chain itself, it's definitely becoming an increasing target. And they've even gone to share that within the next few years, right, by the year 2025, they're expecting to see over 45% of the organizations across the globe experience some sort of supply chain attack. And that's that's a 3x growth in where we're at today. So this is definitely something that's continuing to grow, and it's going to be something that we focus on in the near future. Let's delve into, okay, well, we've talked about the reasons behind it. Let's look at a few samples of where that's actually occurred. And some of these are recent headlines. You can see the details, but I want to illustrate and kind of share like where these supply chain attacks are occurring. And I also want to differentiate between a supply chain attack and a vulnerability that might be introduced through a supply chain. Two very distinct things that need to make sure are clear. There is still a focus on the risk, but there are different entities altogether. So let's start here in the far left. And if we look at this, right, what's the problem associated with the software supply chain? Well, we started to talk about that ecosystem. It's made up of many different components. Sometimes organizations will understand those. There's even anonymous contributors to things like open source libraries, containers, and there's implicit trust that's embedded inside of it. And then in addition to that, it is a weak link, right? This may not have been an area that organizations have spent a lot of their time focusing on. An example of that, and we've seen these types of attacks occur in the wild, and these are two specific types of categories of attacks on the open source community, where items such as dependency confusion, typo squatting, have been ways that malicious attackers have been able to infiltrate the actual open source that's being used and then consumed by organizations to create their end product. If they could go to a point where they can infiltrate that, the impact of everybody that happens to use those can become huge, right? And so we've seen examples of those. On the container side, there's been recent discovery of infected containers where open source containers that are made publicly available have had crypto mining embedded inside them secretly, so that when they're deployed out to production environments, the attacker can then reap the benefit, basically steal resources in order to monetize the resources of the runtime containers in order to do that crypto mining. When you look at the developers, we've seen examples of their targeted attacks associated with them. If I can infiltrate their environments, again, I have potential access to the entire pipeline. There was an attack on Visual Studio in which social media, a social engineering attack was leveraged in order to entice developers to collaborate on investigating some security research. And if they happen to have installed and downloaded this sample app, it installed malware in their environment that could later be used in command and control in order to execute more granular attack. The pipeline, right? The process for actually creating these applications. We've seen a couple of recent attacks there that have had substantial publicity associated with them. One of them would happen to be, an organization that was trying to help other organizations streamline this process by providing details about code coverage during their testing process. What happened as part of this attack, the attacker actually attacked the pipeline of the organization creating the software, right? So this was a direct attack on their pipeline in order to infiltrate their software. And there were some details associated with information that was potentially exposed. They leveraged that exposure in order to directly connect inside of that organization's pipeline and modify the software that they were actually creating. Another huge example of this exact same similar type of attack, that all the details haven't necessarily been disclosed, was the SolarWinds. It is known that as part of the build process, when the developers were updating and creating a new version of SolarWinds, attackers were able to infiltrate the build process and modify the code so that it created something different. So this is a direct attack on the build process in order for the attacker to achieve their objective. The other interesting aspect of both of these last two attacks is they turned into cascading attacks, right? This is where they attacked the pipeline of the originating organization, but the result of that allowed them to infiltrate and change the software, which then was the end product that was consumed by all of their customers. That had much larger implications. So it was one thing to attack SolarWinds. It was the fact that then SolarWinds was used by tens of thousands of organizations across the globe, of which there was substantial exposure associated with that attack. This is why it's become such a focus, right? These attack vectors have substantial impact on, the information that's able to be extracted and consumed, as well as the impact associated with the number of organizations that might be affected. One other interesting thing, and I mentioned this, maybe just briefly earlier, was the fact that this supply chain is digital, which also means some of these changes and that the way they're distributed amongst the globe could be close to instantaneous. Much different than a physical supply chain, right? Where you actually have to build it, distribute it, and get it there. The distribution mechanism of this is digital means, which means an attack and the release of new software can happen so fast, the implications can happen just as fast. So let's start to talk about a little bit, from a government perspective and compliance. We're also starting to see, more focus on this, and within the United States, right? Just recently, this happened just under a year ago. There was an executive order put into place that said, we need to focus more on these software supply chains and start to implement security controls associated with it. This isn't going away, right? This is going to continue to, have additional eyes on it, as well as focus on ensuring that a lot of these elements are protected, especially because there's threat and safety concerns associated with when these things occur. We've talked about what it is, why it came to be, some of the risks behind it. Let's actually now, or some of the attacks associated with it. Let's actually talk about some of the risks areas within that supply chain, right? Let's boil it down to, again, some of the areas that we've seen as part of this attack. Some of this is potentially obvious based upon just the examples we talked about before. But again, the problem associated with it is it's very complex, opaque. There's, in some organizations, there's freedom to use multiple sort of solutions and tools and pipelines and processes. So if we start to drill into those, one of the first areas of risk that we see are the app dependencies, right? These building blocks that are being adopted by a lot of organizations in order to, not have to recreate the wheel every single time that they're creating new applications. So the libraries, the containers, these open source elements that they're being built upon, there's a trust associated with them. So being able to compromise those app dependencies is one of the areas that the, attackers are looking to target. The other area that we've seen an increase in, right, is the pipeline, the process itself. Looking at organizations and how they take that initial code into that release state and all of the elements associated with it, the code repositories, the build process, the storage of that information, looking for weaknesses anywhere in there. If there's not multi-factor authentication, can you do password guessing in order to get access to those code repositories? So these are risks within the organization as well, in addition to those outside. In addition to that, within the pipeline, again, from an adoption perspective, and as we've seen this ecosystem grow, there are outside dependencies that become critical elements to those processes. Build processes and servers, application testing mechanisms, deployment solutions that help automate the pushing of code to different locations. All of these, have additional plugins and components that are being leveraged in order to ensure that, developers can take these ideas, create them, push them out in a very quick and effective process to get them to the end game. All of these are what are contributing to those different attack vectors, right? Bypassing some security measures, which a lot of the organization has locked down across their production apps, but maybe not here. And then again, the enticement of the ability to have those cascading attacks, where if I can infiltrate here, I can use that in order to target multiple sort of audiences. So with that, what do we do, right? What can you do? What are the steps that you can start to take in order to address these? So we talked about the supply chain itself, all the different components, the attack vectors, the risks. What are the steps now as your organization can take in order to start to evaluate these? And some of them are going to be, fairly core or fundamental. And I brought this one up because I know from a security perspective, a lot of organizations, they follow some specific frameworks already. And, those could be the COBIT, the HITRUST, the NIST, ISO, CIS controls. If you're following those, it's very often not much of a stretch to take those sort of frameworks and apply them to that software supply chain. And even so much so that, you take examples like NIST, and they've taken their framework and actually created a framework specifically focused on taking those high-level topics and focusing them specifically on cybersecurity supply chain risks. They've developed a framework for you to leverage. In addition to that, there are also other frameworks that are being created by the community, right? We've seen examples of those. Even Sneak, and I'll share some of the details in just a little bit, how we've focused on it. How can we help organizations understand this? So I'll walk through a few of these. Some of these are core foundations built upon the Linux Foundation, but we'll talk about what's being created, what's available, resources that you have in order to help identify the risk and also start to put some strategies in place in order to mitigate those. The first one I want to talk about, and this is one that was a side effect, right, a fallout of that executive order, which was an SBOM. If you haven't heard of an SBOM, it's a software bill of material. And the analogy that's being used is, think of it as like looking at the ingredients of a food product that you're buying, right? Understanding all the components that go into it. So if you have an allergy, you're aware of it. It's the exact same thing, but from a software perspective. I want to know all the components that go into building that application. And the reason why I want to know is because if there's ever a risk associated with one of those entities, I need to be aware. Now, this is, I think, extremely critical, and there's definitely a focus in the industry to put this in place. And I'm a proponent of it myself, right? Like, it's a phenomenal documentation, it's a phenomenal communication mechanism. However, it doesn't affect or stop or even address supply chain attacks, right? Does it give you a little bit of visibility of risks that might be introduced through supply chains? Yes. Supply chain attacks? No. And even so much that the software bill of materials itself shouldn't ever include any vulnerability or risk data. It should be a simple informational detail associated with a piece of software, right? All of the components. And the reason why is those risk elements change continuously. You need to be able to take your list of ingredients and marry it against any known threat as of today. And as soon as you embed it inside of there, it's no longer valid. That's a software bill of materials, right? It's just a core foundational. It can be used for communication, whether you use it internally, whether or not it's shared through your customers, or you ingest it in order to understand risks of third-party solutions you may be leveraging. Getting into the details of the software supply chain, there's also a few other open source communities that are focused on helping provide some guidance associated with solving these problems. One of those, and this is, again, it's a project that was created by the Open SSF, right? The Open Source Security Foundation. It's a very specific project nicknamed SALSA, right? Which stands for Supply Chain Levels for Software Architects. And the whole idea behind it is to provide a set of guidelines in order to help you inspect that supply chain and start to put gradual sort of thresholds associated with moving to more of a secure process. The cool part about this one, right, they segment it into different buckets or areas. There's the build process, there's the dependencies that are embedded inside of there, there's the source code. And then they start to put some frameworks associated with activities you can do that you can help to secure that. So you can pick and choose those. They're not dependent upon each other. You can implement ones that are more effective or for higher risk areas and start to achieve those. So it's one of the ones that can be leveraged. Similar, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation has also put together, again, a list of security best practices associated with the supply chain. If you look at some of the details there too, they've taken a very similar approach, right? Focused on, here are some steps to secure your code. Here are some steps to secure the materials that are coming in, the pipelines themselves, the artifacts that you're creating, right? So a lot of this is about, one, establishing visibility and understanding awareness, but then two, starting to take advantage of some of the security techniques that you can help to mitigate those risks within all of those different areas. The supply chain attacks, are very broad in how they're happening, and making sure you put the security controls across the entire process becomes a critical component of that. From a Snyk perspective, we've also said, hey, is there something that we can do? Like, our focus is helping organizations understand their risks and security associated with these applications, all the way from, when it's created to when it's deployed in production cloud environments, even the security associated with that cloud. And so we've built a very quick cheat sheet that, again, can be leveraged to help put some thought around what are some of these steps that I can use in order to mitigate those risks. If we look at the summary associated with those, again, we've put them into these different buckets and categories in order to say, what are those controls? This is embedded inside of that cheat sheet. It's available on our site if you reach out to us. We can also share some of the details associated with it, but it focuses on the open source dependencies, the containers, focusing on the software bill of materials, the code that you write, the infrastructure as code, which defines that cloud infrastructure, but also the pipelines, right? The components that are used in those processes associated with building those applications. Last but not least, as we wrap up here, one of the things that I wanted to make sure was also extremely clear. And that's this focus of, and this idea of DevSecops. So we've talked a lot about the different components, the risks, some of the mitigation strategies, but one of the probably most important aspects of all of this, in order to, you can have the best framework, right? The best ideas and concepts, but if you don't implement it correctly, it doesn't achieve the goal that you wanted it to. And at Snyk, and this is a core of our focus as an organization, we believe, and the whole idea of DevOps, right? This concept of developer operations, which was a collaboration of developers and IT ops that came together in order to automate these processes, was built on that collaboration idea. Include everyone in the organization that's going to be utilizing it, consuming it, using it in daily activities. And so as you start to implement these strategies, it's critical that you collaborate with the individuals, the developers, the DevOps, the SRE teams, right? The software reliability engineers, to ensure that the components that you want to deliver and put in place are in something that's consumable and usable and doesn't interrupt this process and just helps facilitate that process, achieve your security goals while still letting the business, achieve what it's trying to from a software perspective. That collaboration is one of the things that I want to make sure I leave everyone with, is probably one of the core components for adoption awareness, right? All of these are critical in order to achieve the objectives of mitigating some of those risks within the software supply chain. So with that said, I would definitely like to thank everybody for your attention, listening to these details. If you haven't had a chance yet, leveraging the chat, please ask any questions associated with the presentation and anything that you would like to know.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechstrongTV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Annika Gupta, who is the Chief Product Officer at Rubrik. Annika, thank you so much for joining me today. Do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, well, I'm glad to have you here. I want to talk to you a little bit about what really makes an effective cybersecurity strategy for organizations. And it's really not a difficult equation if you think about it. But before we get started with that, I was wondering if you could just introduce us to Rubrik.
Absolutely. So Rubrik is a leading data security company. The challenge that we're solving for our customers and for the world's largest enterprises is helping companies build cyber resilience at the layer of their data. So making sure that, what we're seeing happen today is that no matter what kind of safeguards you put in place, attackers are still coming in and able to access the data. And every organization needs a path and a way to make sure that their data is going to be resilient so that their business is resilient. And that's what Rubrik is solving for.
Well, that's awesome, and you are absolutely correct in saying that there's no such thing as bulletproof security. It seems like these days. So organizations need to really kind of think about all parameters or all aspects of their data, their networks, any way in which threat actors can access their network and their data, and really do some harm. So let's talk about this equation that does make an effective cybersecurity strategy. And I say it's really not a difficult one because we use it in so many other different parts of IT, and it is that magic 3 is the magic number, right? Going back to my Schoolhouse Rock days there. But so people, process, and technology. That's it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think any places where you're trying to tackle major change management across an organization, it really comes down to those 3 pillars of people, process, and technology, because it's really when you bring all those 3 together of getting the right talent, the right processes in place within your organization, and then the right technology to actually augment the people and process, where you're truly able to get the results that you need as an organization. And nowhere is that more important in cybersecurity, because things are changing so quickly. They're changing so quickly because attackers are changing their methodologies. It's such a lucrative business for attackers that it's just a constant cat and mouse game that organizations have to play. And then on top of that, every organization is changing their own infrastructure and data strategy. More data is shifting into the cloud. People are starting to have, enterprises are starting to have a much broader surface area of data and infrastructure as they're thinking about their data that's sitting in their on-prem enterprises, in the cloud, within their SaaS applications. It's a pretty crazy world out there. And so for anyone that's working in IT and security, their job is not easy because so much is changing.
Yeah, I talk to cybersecurity personnel all the time, and every single one is, they all admit nobody has that magic formula. Nobody's got it figured out. And as much as there have been advances in the cybersecurity community, it seems that threat actors are still always one step ahead. So it really does behoove the organization to really, pull everything together within an organization to have the best defenses available. So let's kind of parse out this people, process, and technology idea. What is it that you think organizations, where are they kind of falling down in that?
Yeah, let's break it down. So I think starting with people, people is often it's the most important pillar in many ways, and it's also the most challenging because you need, especially when you think about cybersecurity, we want people that have cybersecurity experience. However, the pool of people that actually have cybersecurity experience is really small, and everyone is highly sought after. So organizations are starting to find I need to invest in new talent and training new talent up. And also it's you want people that are not only thinking about how, what cybersecurity looked like in the past 5-10 years, but who can really adapt to the future, because we don't know. As I said, everything is changing. The threat actors are changing, and we need people that are adaptable in the organization. And so looking for talent that's both you can bring in and train and is truly going to be adaptable to the changes and be able to learn on the job and shift the focus as organization needs change. That's going to be what creates the most effective team, and pairing those with people that have the depth of experience that can really do that training. So you need both. You can't have just one or the other. So I think that's super important. And then from a process perspective, it's actually let's go into technology. From a technology perspective, it's thinking about what are the best tools for your organization. And the challenge with it is that there's no one size fits all model. Right. Technology is a tool in the toolbox. It's not a solution. And so you have to figure out, based on your own technology footprint, your own priorities as an organization, how is that changing over time? What are going to be the best tools and technology that you want to bring in to your organization to both prevent attackers from getting in, but then also making sure that if an attacker gets in, because as we said, it's not bulletproof, you have the right technology in place to bounce back. And both of those are really important. And it's not that it's often organizations are having to take a test and learn approach where they try out some technologies. Some of them are going to work. Some of them don't end up working the way that they want to. And then you iterate and continue to get better after that. And then the process is like, how do you bring together all the people that you've assembled in your team, both the experienced as well as the people are going to be adaptable and you're going to have to be training, as well as like, what are the technology tools and how do you build a process to actually get the best out of both of those pieces?
And it seems as though most organizations don't have a good balance between people, process, and technology. And in my mind, if we think about the people, you mentioned the fact that we need qualified cybersecurity personnel, but organizations don't really seem to want to kind of break out of the mold of what they consider to be a good, a cybersecurity person. And I kind of keep banging the drum about the fact that there are so many good people out there that might not have a lot of cybersecurity knowledge, but they're willing to learn, and they really are very, very fascinated and interested in the topic, and they want to do good. I mean, but so many organizations don't see beyond the fact that they only have maybe 1 or 2 years of experience or no experience, but they're willing to they want to break into the space. So do you think that organizations are maybe kind of a little too narrow focused when it comes to that people part of the equation?
Absolutely. And I don't even think that's just true in security. I think that's true for so many different roles that we have a very narrow definition often when we're thinking about hiring for our teams of what's going to make someone successful. Mm-hmm. And it's often based on like what we've seen before other people on our team that have been successful. And we need to break out of that mold, because the reality is like, if we keep fishing from the same pool, first of all, you're not going to be able to fill your roles. And second of all, you're not actually bringing in that talent that's going to bring a diverse set of perspectives to the table. And when we're talking about threat actors coming from so many different places, and there's a lot of diversity within the threat actors. If you don't actually build a diverse team and start to really open up the pool and landscape of people that you're going after, you are not necessarily going to build a cyber strategy that's truly as holistic as it could be.
That's a good point. And by the same equation, if you're looking at the technology, it seems like there seems to be kind of like a hot technology or a hot area of security that everybody tries to gravitate toward. And then a couple of years later, there's another one that comes, and it's like how, I feel like organizations tend to kind of jump on the cybersecurity bandwagon. They don't really think about an effective cybersecurity for their organization. Am I right in thinking about that, or is it thinking that way, or is it?
I think that that's certainly happening where because there is so much hot technology out there, and there's so many, it's almost like every 6 months there's a new cybersecurity fad and technology that's out there on the table, and no one wants to be left behind, because it's at the end of the day, the cyber teams within organizations are left holding the bag if something goes wrong. Right. And so no one wants to be on the wrong side of saying, hey, everyone else was adopting this technology, and I didn't do it. That being said, I think a lot of dollars have been spent on technology that isn't actually solving an important and urgent problem for the organization. So for cybersecurity leaders, I think it's really critical to understand, what are your priorities? What are you trying to solve for with this technology? And using that matrix of important and urgent, is this an important problem to solve for my organization? And do I need to solve it right now? Because the reality is everything may seem important, but not you can't actually solve for everything immediately. And if you're buying technology without understanding how that fits in with your priorities, you're going to end up buying a lot of technology that ends up as shelfware.
I agree. And at the same time, when we're looking at the processes, it's not, it's not just about putting in the technology, turning it on and say, all right, now we have a security strategy. You actually have to kind of walk people through the, what their role is as an individual with the organization. But I don't think that there's actually enough education happening within organizations so that employees themselves really do understand their roles, but also from a much more kind of holistic perspective, what the security really means for the organization. So what do you think organizations can do to kind of break out of that rut, if you will?
I think it's employing all of the best thinking around how do you handle change management within an organization. And that's like true for within the security team. So you're adopting, you have new people that you've brought on, you have new technology. You've got to figure out how does that technology integrate with what your team is doing. How do you need your cyber teams to operate differently in order for them to get the most benefit out of the technology to really achieve the objectives you want? But it doesn't end with your cyber team. It's like your cyber team ends up being the nexus of a lot of other teams across the organization. You need to educate your developers on how things are changing and how these technologies and sets of tools need to be leveraged to achieve specific objectives within the software development lifecycle. You need to work with like employees and educate them on phishing attacks and all the other things that can happen in ways that people can get in, so that you're reducing that risk. You have to work with your product teams on like how are you going to impact your own product roadmap and what are the capabilities you need to shore up security. And all of these are changes. It's not, most organizations don't have this figured out. They haven't figured out how to integrate security holistically across their organization using the people, technology, and process. And so, approaching this as like, this is change. Making change happen requires like educating people on why this is important, and then really walking them through like what you need them to do and how you need them to operate differently. And again, taking a test and learn approach, because you're going to try stuff is not going to work. You're going to learn along the way. And that's completely fine. That's all part of building excellence across the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people cybersecurity is almost like a living thing. It changes almost minute by minute, and you really have to pay attention and keep up with the changes. Otherwise, all of a sudden, you're going to be way behind on not just your cybersecurity strategy, but it really does impact every corner of the business. So I think organizations are doing for the most part, they're doing a great job with their cybersecurity efforts. But striking that right balance between the people, process, and technology, I think is critical for success.
Yeah, and what worked today or what works today for your organization may not work tomorrow. And I think that can be very scary, because you're like, well, I figured it out, but things are changing so quickly, and just recognizing that that's okay. And every organization is on their journey, and as long as you're making progress every single day in the right direction, like that's the most that you can ask for, not having 100% foolproof business or bulletproof business, but truly being on that, embodying that growth mindset throughout your organization and throughout your process.
I agree. Well, Annika, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. This has been great. I really did enjoy it. And hopefully we'll have you back on for another Techstrong TV.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
Right, awesome. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Initech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Initech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Initech conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechstrongTV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Dan Lorman, who is the Field Chief Information Security Officer over Presidio. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today. I do appreciate it.
Charlene, it's wonderful to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You bet. So I'm sure most of us are familiar with Presidio. You guys have been around for quite a while, but why don't, for those of us who aren't familiar with Presidio, can you give us just a quick overview of what you guys do?
Sure. Presidio is a global digital solutions provider. We help companies transform their enterprises into basically secure architectures. We get involved in all different types of aspects of technology. Cybersecurity is obviously my focus, but we help companies make the journey to the cloud. We help companies run their network. We have managed solutions where we partner with the top companies all over the world. So we really do a lot of work throughout the technology industry and really globally.
Excellent. Excellent. So your focus is cybersecurity, which is awesome. And it's very relevant to the topic I want to discuss with you today, which is some of the changing regulations regarding cybersecurity incident reporting in the financial services sector. So I wonder if you could kind of break down for me a little bit about what it is that we're talking about here. What's changed within the financial services industry and the regulations attached to cybersecurity incident reporting?
Sure. So really started kind of last year in November 23rd of 21, the FDIC issued some new rules, basically saying that beginning April 1st, but really mandated beginning May 1st of 2022, that basically financial services companies would need to be reporting significant incidents. So that would be a ransomware attack, major cyber attack, some kind of outage related to denial of service attack, those kinds of things. And but basically, there's a very structured reporting process that they have to follow, and that was going to be something that was required of all financial institutions.
So I imagine, depending on the size of the institution and the scope of their capabilities, there's going to be some organizations that might have a hard time complying with what the FDIC is looking for.
I think, Charlene, I think for the smaller companies, I agree with you. I think, for the small banks, maybe regional banks, certainly organizations that have very small IT staffs and hopefully they all have incident response plans and have done some level of disaster recovery and business continuity planning. But for the large banks, this was something that they've been working on for years with the financial services ISAC, and it's been something that the timelines have changed. That it's kind of accelerated. This 36-hour rule is certainly accelerated. But I agree that some of the smaller organizations, smaller banks that are covered by this, it is a challenge for them, and kind of thinking through all the different aspects of who they need to report to, kind of who, what, when, where, and how, and really working through those details is a challenge.
So you mentioned the 36-hour rule, which has been accelerated from, I can't remember, I think it was 72 hours or maybe been a little bit longer than that. But what are some of the other, changes that are more obvious that, that maybe we as consumers actually might see as the result?
Yeah, I think the question of kind of who you report to, and I think there's a number. If you go out and look at the rules, talking about the Office of the Controller of the Currency, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, which is, the Federal Reserve, the process of how that works, and really the contacts for those people. I think that's a major change. And so and you're thinking through when you do that, what are the thresholds? What would trigger this? I mean, I think some incidents we think about in general for the, anyone in the IT industry, or it's just someone who's watching this who may not have a technology background, the Colonial Pipeline kind of an incident, or a JBS Meats kind of an incident, those clearly would qualify, right? Yeah. But, organizations and banks are hit by attacks every day of the week, and it's a constant 7/24, 365. People are trying to get our money, and organizations have a lot of security in place to stop that. So, what triggers that level, and really thinking through how they would be notifying their obviously the Federal Reserve and the different reporting structures that are laid out in the rules. Mm-hmm. But also, how do they, report to their clients? How do they report to their partners? And really thinking through, we think of SolarWinds, but the supply chain, we think of software, being, banks are companies that use a wide variety of different software and hardware from a wide variety of sources. So thinking about, what if one of them had a breach and then that impacted your operations? And what is the domino effect? As you think through how you run your organization? I think really those are really difficult challenges given different scenarios. So thinking through those scenarios is part of the challenge in front of banks.
Yeah, and it, I mean, obviously they're a highly regulated industry, and there are lots of other highly regulated industries that I'm sure are going to be seeing some similar sanctions or regulation changes to their regulations coming down the pike. I would assume sooner rather than later, given the cybersecurity landscape or the threat landscape especially over the last 2 years. Are there other areas where you think we might see some similar movements by regulatory bodies to kind of, maybe improve our cybersecurity response?
Absolutely. And the law that was just signed by President Biden in March, it's really got bipartisan support. It's something that's been resisted in previous, years, and whether it be the situation in Ukraine, whether, the global challenges we're facing right now with ransomware, which is the explosion in the number of ransomware attacks, et cetera. That law basically says all critical infrastructure sectors will ultimately have data breach reporting and, same kind of rules in place. Now, obviously, it's going to be different for different industries, right? And so banks are a little bit different than others, but expect that for transportation, expect that for government entities, expect that for really all of those critical infrastructure, SIP, critical covered by CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, which is part of DHS. All of those different sectors, I think this is coming down the pike for all of them. That law states, it says that. Now, they've got 2 years to come up with the specific rules of, what is allowed, what's not allowed, who, what, when, where, and how. Some of those details that are in place now for the banks have to be worked through in those other critical infrastructure sectors. But yes, I think we're going to see this pretty much become the norm across the board. And then the reporting to CISA, let's talk about reporting to the FBI, reporting to other organizations. And I think that's going to happen, I'm guessing, in the next 12 months.
So yeah, you mentioned they have 2 years to do this. To me, that seems like forever in cybersecurity years. Basically, it's don't you think that once it finally gets put into place, it's going to be completely outdated, because I think just moves so fast in cybersecurity?
I'm not sure why I agree with you. And I'm not sure why the 2-year number was in there. I think everyone thinks it's going to be much faster than that. And I think, it's already been steps being taken in most of the critical infrastructure sectors. We talk about utilities, everyone's been thinking about, what if there was an attack against the grid, for example. So, natural gas, electricity, those are critical infrastructure sectors, and we all obviously other sectors rely on those sectors, right? So this has been in the works for a while. I think I fully expect to see some of that in place in under a year. I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say there's going to be sectors that are going to have similar processes and procedures in place in 2022 by Christmas of this year. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot faster than that. I think the 2 years was kind of a long pole, if you will, certainly for some of the sectors maybe that are less, I don't say less critical, but less public exposure, less maybe give them a little bit more time. But I think you're going to see many sectors like utilities, transportation, our airlines, government facilities. You're going to start seeing those in place in 2022.
So here's a question for you. So we're talking about, quote unquote, critical infrastructure. And it seems like that umbrella keeps getting larger and larger and larger because not, either a company is or an organization is part of the critical infrastructure, such as the Department of Transportation or something like that. Or you've got like a Sunoco gas station. I mean, technically they could be part of the critical infrastructure as well because, they're ancillary, but they're, definitely part of, so what defines a critical infrastructure these days?
It's a great question. One that I've blogged about, Charlene, many times. And especially I don't know that, right now, as we're, talking today here, in mid-May, the shortage of literally baby formula
the baby
around the country. I mean, I don't know that that's on the list, but it's certainly critical right now around the United States. So, I mean, you bring up a great point. And anything, and the other part of that, I mean, it is very well defined. It's clearly defined. I'm not going to quote you the definition. You can go to the DHS website and you can look up, the Department of Homeland Security, what is critical infrastructure, but it would, large economic impact and, societal impact, should there be a disruption. But to your point, I think where the challenge comes into play is where you have the trickle down effect. So you pick something like oil and gas, and you mentioned absolutely gas stations could clearly be part of that. But what about the suppliers to those organizations? What about we have the supply chain, which is a global supply chain. We're getting hit in China right now with all kinds of coronavirus, COVID-19 related shutdowns, and so supplies can't get to the U.S. So I'm sure there are certain products and maybe services that can't be supplied to different businesses in the United States because of that. So there may be a trickle down, and those things may not be on the list. So there is a clear definition. I think I don't have it right in front of me. I can't read it to you, but it really comes down to would cause major impact to the society, to the United States, the well-being, the economic, financial, social fabric of our nation, and they list the different critical infrastructures, and they've added some over the years. I mean, for a while there was not, and autos was not on the list, and then they created a critical infrastructure around automobiles and the whole. I'm in Michigan, so the whole process around manufacturing of vehicles. So I mean, there are things that get added in over time, but it really comes down to what the most critical, the most high level priority companies and functions in society.
Yeah, and everything is so connected these days that it's, even if something isn't considered critical, it is certainly part of that supply chain, which you mentioned. So, I mean, even things you don't even think about that like the vendor for the snack machine in the office or something like that. They're on a network, they're connected. So, there's that whole larger conversation about whether these companies actually fall under that umbrella as well and should be subject to the same rules and regulations. But it's there's a lot to unpack when you think about the government's their involvement in ensuring our infrastructure remains safe and all of the different organizations involved. So this is something that's not going to be going away anytime soon. So Dan, I fully expect to have you back on so that we can have another conversation about this in the future as things change. Maybe right around the end of the year, the beginning of next year, we'll see if your prediction about the organizations being online and compliant by the end of this year, see if that rings true. But thank you so much today. I did appreciate today's conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Look forward to coming back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecops, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
With a great pleasure being joined by Taryn Chopra. Taryn is VP of IBM Z Hybrid Cloud. Welcome, Taryn.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you for having me on the forum.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We all know about IBM, but say a little bit about Z Cloud, Hybrid Cloud, and we're going to get into that some more, I think.
So as you mentioned, Mitch, I'm the Vice President of IBM Z System Hybrid Cloud. And what that entails is really helping our clients realize the benefit and the value of the hybrid cloud strategy IBM has set up on our platform, on the Z System platform. And that includes, how to help clients modernize the applications on the platform, how to help them manage their real estate, both on-prem, cloud, or hybrid, or also helping clients get some of the value of the Z System platform on IBM Cloud as well. So it's kind of a very holistic portfolio, really geared towards helping clients adopt the benefit of the digital transformation that, Mitch, we are all seeing in the marketplace after the pandemic.
Yeah, it's interesting, the whole acceleration of digital transformation and the Z platform and everything, all the great things that are happening. There's some really cool news, exciting news, I know, that you'd like to talk to us about.
Yeah, definitely, Mitch. And before I talk about the news itself, right, we just recently launched Z16 platform in the marketplace, right? And if you look at how the Z System platform is performing over the last 4 or 5 years per se, it's a renaissance for the platform, right? And if you see the Z15 outperforming our Z14 platform, 67 of the top Fortune 500 companies using this platform, 47 of the top 50 banks using this platform, 8 of the top 10 insurance, and I can go on and on. One of the reasons this platform is great is all the characteristics of reliability, availability, serviceability that customers and consumers have loved over the years. In these tough times, it just comes more to the forefront. And then you add the digital transformation that is taking place in the marketplace. It was happening, I think we both agree, over the last 10 plus years or so, but I think the pandemic has kind of really sharpened the C-suite focus on this whole digital transformation effort, because they have realized for them to excel in this marketplace and for them to be prepared for the next event happening in the world, they need to be prepared. And this is, and Z System runs the core businesses of these major enterprises. So it becomes very important for them how to make sure their critical business is up and running. And for that, one of the key topics that has been resonating very well in the marketplace is around the whole modernization thematic, right? How to modernize their application on the platform so they can play in this modern economy, right? They can leverage the assets they have invested over the years even more better and be more agile in this environment. And part of that discussion is really around DevOps, Mitch, right? How to use the modern DevOps tooling to help facilitate that transformation. We've been, over the last, I will say 4 or 5 years, Mitch, doing a great job on the platform to enable all the open source tooling from a development testing perspective. You name the languages, the compilers, the open source tooling, the editors, the IDEs, all of that stuff, the GitLabs and the GitHubs, all of this is being available on the platform. And what we're going to announce or what we are GAing now is also making it available, some of those dev test capabilities in IBM Cloud as well. So who would have thought Z system and dev tests and Z, will be available in cloud, but our customers are looking for that agility, right? Our customers are looking for that flexibility, and they want to empower their developers even more. Skills is an important topic on the mainframe platform, on the Z system platform, right? So what we are announcing today, or what we are GAing today, is really enabling for the first time our customers to start their DevOps journey for IBM Z system platform on IBM Cloud. They can spin up a ZOS dev test environment in less than 6 minutes. Let me say that again. They can spin up a ZOS dev test environment in less than 6 minutes in IBM
I'm not
Cloud.
sure I can fill out a help desk ticket that fast.
Yeah,
so that's pretty amazing.
It is, and the feedback we have gotten from the clients, Mitch, has just been amazing. We usually run a lot of these transformative projects through our IBM design thinking methodology, really anchored on sponsor users, getting clients' feedback. What are they seeing in our these projects? What improvements we can make? Really co-create with us, right? Really co-create. It has served us very well in the Z14 program, the Z15 programs, and the recent Z16 programs. We did the same thing with our WASI dev test in IBM Cloud, or ZOS dev test in IBM Cloud. And I have to tell you, Mitch, we got so much interest that we had to stop the sponsor user program because we just couldn't take any more users to test out these capabilities. So we know we're hitting a nerve and a pinch point for our clients. And I really think this next set of capabilities is going to really unleash the next innovation, or usher the next innovation on the Z system platform.
It's truly amazing. I think just from my own perspective, the last 3 to 5 years, how much transformation has happened in the Z space, in the DevOps and tooling, really bringing it from what we thought of maybe more traditional mainframe development, Z platform development, into Linux, and then into DevOps tools, DevOps processes, open source you mentioned, and now adding a true cloud capability to that whole kind of development process. Makes it just as kind of an equal player in all ways as part of developing software. Because I know from my own perspective, you might be working on a new app, you might be working on an existing app, but those things always talk to each other and they have interdependencies between each other. And now we really truly have the capability to meet the demands and acceleration of the business.
No, I agree, Mitch. And when you think of when we think about the ZOS dev test in cloud, it's really a complementary capabilities of what our clients today have in our on-prem environment. So when we talk about hybrid, right, it's really connecting both the worlds. I've also seen, Mitch, where the narrative has shifted, just moving everything to cloud. The clients are realizing there are certain workloads that are good for cloud. There's certain workloads that are good for their on-prem environment. There are the certain workloads they want in this hybrid world, right? So they can get the best and the optimization of the both worlds. So for example, as I said, we've been in the last 4 years on this journey to enable modern DevOps tooling in our on-prem environment. And we have seen the results of that. Now we are enabling the same stack, same PaaS layer into IBM Cloud. So from a client perspective, what they are used to running in on-prem, all the modern DevOps tooling, is the same tooling now they can run in IBM Cloud. The benefit is the agility they get from the optimization of the infrastructure, where they don't have to now think about infrastructure and how to manage it, how to create it, how to set it up. We will kind of take care of all those responsibilities. And from a hybrid perspective, it's a very complementary thing where, for this ZOS dev test environment, from a use cases perspective, you can think about, early dev test testing for flexibility, independence, the way developer works, right? They don't have to wait for this sysprocs to give them the infrastructure. You can think about some early infrastructure testing. For example, think about all the malicious things that are happening in the world and so many software patches, fixes, upgrades our customers have to go do. Now they can quickly do an early testing in those ZOS DevTest cloud environment. Think about it from an education and skills perspective, Mitch, right? One of the key things for our platform is to bring the next generation of developers on the platform, give them all the toolings they need and know. Now, from their perspective, is Z platform development testing is no different than any other cloud development testing. Think about the innovation we can unleash for the platform, right? Usually, the curve of innovation on the platform can be a little bit slow because of the criticality of the workloads our customers are running on the platform. So they're very cognizant in terms of how they bring other new innovative things on the platform. Now think about they can decouple those kind of things, right? And do some sort of early innovative work and development and testing in cloud environments. And from a technology perspective, Mitch, as I said, is fascinating, right? Less than 6 minutes to bring a VSI, a virtual server instance for dev test. Today we have products like ZDNT that provides x86 alternatives. This WASI dev test, ZOS dev test, now in IBM Cloud is running on real Z hardware, and the performance to existing solution is almost 15x better. So it is a game-changing capability and technology we're bringing in the market.
I was just going to say, my kids would say this is a game changer.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, from the feedback we are receiving, Mitch, it is truly a game changer. And I truly think, and we truly think collectively, that this is going to unleash the next level of innovation for the platform, and most importantly for our clients. That's the most important thing for us.
So talk a little bit, you mentioned WASI, WASI as a service, how that fits into this strategy and in your announcement.
Yeah, exactly. And our goal is to make sure from a strategy perspective, number one, help our clients get the best out of the investments they have done on the platform. Mm-hmm. Second, to achieve that goal, they have to modernize. We have to help them modernize the applications on the platform. DevOps is a key strategic pillar to implementing that strategy. We have a modern DevOps stack available today to run for our clients, of which a lot of our clients are using it, getting the value out of the platform. Where WASI as a service fits in now, Mitch, excellent question, is it's extending that capability, extending that value proposition for our clients that today exists in an on-prem environment, and bring that to IBM Cloud as well in a true as a service fashion, where depending on the use cases, depending on the nature of the work they are doing, our customers are doing, they can pick and choose cloud, they can pick and choose their on-prem environment, or they can do it on both places, because the technology stack, the experience is the same from a software and DevOps sort of capability. So it's truly about providing customers the flexibility they need. It's also about giving customers the options depending on their choice where they want to go run. But most importantly for us is really giving their developers the flexibility and freedom to innovate without being constrained through the existing paradigm that a customer might have established in their environment. So for us, WASI as a service is a critical piece of that whole modernization strategy, and extending it and providing the flexibility to our clients through a cloud consumption, a pure as a service consumption model as well.
I'd love to hear you say a little bit more about, I think the thinking around app and modernization, replacement versus modernization has really shifted. What changes have happened there?
I think the changes is clients have realized, right? It's not that easy to rip and replace. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of dollars. It takes a lot of very intelligent human resource capital to do work where they can apply that capital to new innovative projects, to new innovative business models. So, and also to the fact that they have also realized that IBM has started to provide a lot of these capabilities on the platform. A lot of proof points are coming around, right? So customers are getting smarter about it, right? To say, hey, the answer is not just cloud. The answer is just not rip and replace. The answer is how can I get the best out of both worlds? And what I mean by that, depending on the workload characteristics, if it needs to run in cloud, runs in cloud. If it needs to run on-prem, runs on on-prem. If it needs to run or exist in both paradigms, then IBM is the place where we can provide that glue for our customers. So it's really, I will say, Mitch, customer-driven, where through experimentation, through their work, they have realized it's like they have a golden nugget sitting in their own environment, and it's better to just nurture it, water it, help it grow, because by doing that, they can get the best value.
Yeah, I think I would expect we'll see kind of what we've seen in our app development environment today. Once you kind of open up the infrastructure and make that dynamic, and developer says, I need to spin up an environment that looks like this, and this, and do whatever dev test or whatever I'm doing. That really opens up what they can do, how quickly they can do it, and kind of work today, tomorrow, whatever's on their work plan.
Great point. And the most important, as they see, look, it's no different to develop on the mainframe platform than any other platform.
Right.
That's where they get the efficiency of their broader development team. Right. So they don't have to have a siloed Z system or mainframe team and a distributed team and a cloud team. They have a pool of developers and creators, and they use a common set of tools and capabilities to go build applications and workloads wherever they deem fit. So once they realize, oh my God, I can just unleash them on whichever platform I can, then it's game changing for them, right? And the capabilities like containerizations further enhance that thing, where they can build one, deploy multiple times on different platform, right? That's the holy grail our customers are looking for, right? How can they get the best out of their innovative teams and not have these siloed, where I have a cloud team, I have a distributed team, I have an on-prem team. They want just one team where, depending on their needs, they can unleash them to wherever they go. And our strategy is really, Mitch, to enable that common set of toolings and experiences, so that we take away that kind of a fight out in the marketplace, right? The mainframe is different, mainframe is silo. And as I said, our results are speaking to it. That strategy is resonating and is getting executed. And we have a lot of good proof points in the marketplace that our customers have themselves talked about, and how they have benefited from the strategy.
It does. It seems like it just kind of opens up the world of what you can do. We already had a big world already, but now really to the whole platform.
It does. We have this validated service. We have taken a next big, I will say, giant step in removing the roadblocks, some of the common roadblocks to the modernization, but also opening up the platform to a much bigger audience, bigger, and also changing the perceptions. When clients, the C-suite, the leaders see that kind of innovation on the platform, I have seen the eyes lit up, right? I have seen, oh my God, I didn't know IBM is doing this with the Z system and the mainframe platform. So that's very exciting.
Achieving more kind of a parity of what we can do across our technology portfolio and applications.
Most definitely.
Very exciting. Well, congratulations. Where can folks find out more? Where can they sign up to be part of this? How can they get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I said, for us, this service is like any other service going to IBM Cloud and provisioning it. I think we're going to have a link in there where clients can go and start playing and testing these capabilities out. Think about that's the beauty of it. They don't have to worry about getting a system or anything.
Yeah.
After this, watching this video, they can go click the links and go hammer it away.
Let the innovation begin.
Yep.
All right.
Most definitely.
Karen, congratulations. It is very exciting. I'm so happy to see just a succession of great things happening.
No, this is great. Our teams are very excited in terms of what the customers can do with this capability. So thank you so much for the forum.
I think it opens up so many possibilities. So congrats, Karen Chopra. Thank you for being with us, and welcome back. Let's talk some more about this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch.
is TechstrongTV.
Well, the distinct pleasure of being joined by Tim Eads. Welcome, Tim. Tim, CEO with vArmor. And great to be talking with you at RSA. I think that's what we're going to talk about. It's kind of, we're all at RSA. What is that all about? Tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about vArmor.
So first of all, great to be here. Fantastic to be at RSA. It's been 2+ years, and a lot of swap your Zoom seats for your plane seats. Come on in, and it's okay. So I'm Tim Eads. I'm the CEO of vArmor. We have a solution called the Relationship Cloud. We help people understand their risk and reduce that risk against ransomware by going in and understanding relationships and dependencies of applications, users, and infrastructure. So without putting agents down or API agents or anything down into your infrastructure, we suck the value out, build a relationship map to understand relationships and dependencies. And then from there, you can see what is happening, what should happen, and take control of what you want to have happen.
All those dots you have, but not how to interconnect.
It's crazy.
Right?
People don't know what's talking to what. It's just, that's how life is.
How about your background? Tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, I'm English. I'm an old punk. I used to have a big Tomahawk Mohican bleach white Dr. Martin boots.
I remember that. No, I don't. I'm just kidding.
Bit of a hooligan. Started off in finance, decided finance was boring, moved into marketing, moved into sales, and then ended up being a CEO in the security industry.
Found your place, right?
Found your place. The good thing about security is you get fresh fruit every day. And as I've got older, it's my third company, you have a real opportunity to pass on and mentor other people. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big believer in leaning in and mentoring and building a community about trying to make this enterprise the enterprise is more secure, the country's more secure, and ultimately the end user is more secure.
Well, Tim, it's great to be back together. We're all kind of craved that being around other people again instead of just on the other side of the Zoom screen. And, I think the theme, what I hear from multiple people is, it's about being together, but we have to work together in new and different ways. We've got to up our game for security because it's not getting easier, it's not getting better. Everyone else is getting more sophisticated, and we aren't going to do it on our own. And we've got to band together. We've got to pull together as a real community.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't agree more. If you look at the world, the situation in the Ukraine, the strain that's put on the whole world, the political system, the rise of attacks, the rise of ransomware attacks, the mission has never been clearer. And the requirement for the community to work together has never been clearer. It's great. I was with Jen Easterly this week. She's talking about more and more public and private collaboration for that community to really lean in. So we're seeing that from the administration. But it's good to be back here, and the mission isn't lost. It was hard to do it over Zoom, to feel the same way, and the passion. But the mission to secure the enterprises, the countries, and the users, still there. And it's just great to be among people who share your same passion.
Sometimes that disruption causes you to reconnect and engage further, lean in, like the term you're talking about. Well, tell us about, I'm really curious about vArmor. You talk a lot about relationships. And I'm an old data guy, right? So sure. And that always goes back to relationships and data that we're protecting and data obviously that you're collecting.
Yeah.
But it's, putting the dots together, connecting those dots is more than just the lines. It's the context of how
100%.
Those things fit together and why.
Yeah, I mean, so 10, 12 years ago, you talked a lot about application security, right? 5 years ago, 7 years ago, you talked about workload security, container security, really. But over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to talk about data security. Data security is going to come in a whole bunch of different ways. Data at rest, data at use, data in motion, all that kind of stuff. But also data flows and how things are supported by the application. So we believe relationships matter, right? So relationships, workload A talks to B, talks to C, talks to D. You move B to the cloud, A, C, and D break. Unless you didn't understand it. If B gets compromised, A, C, and D are infected. So, those relationships and those dependencies are tremendously important, particularly as you weave in users and everything else to it. But then as you move forward, data dependency and data relationships become in place because data is more distributed than ever before. So as data moves out of a Snowflake or a Hadoop cluster into an app to serve it, to provide its function, you need to understand its lineage and how it flows. So we're big believers in relationships matter. RSA is all about that, obviously, because you can build a community. But it's how our product is designed and how our customers use it. Is because you do need data to understand relationships. You do need to understand data dependencies, and that will move into data for sure.
Well, too, it's also It's all over the organization. In my view, there's no such thing as IT anymore. I mean, calling IT is kind of about 20 years past due getting rid of that term, because a large percentage in some organizations is the majority of the technology investment, technology spend is happening in marketing and business units and all over the company. And then we do acquisitions and mergers and things really get mixed up. And thinking about that interconnection of data, how it's used, where it can break, how we secure it across that fabric that's in motion in some ways. It's not a static thing. It might be static for the point in time you look at it, but by the time you've turned away and looked at something else, it's probably already changed.
And incredibly hard for the security organization to look after, right? I mean, because you need to understand what is happening in your environment. Difficult to do, of course, all those business units and mergers and acquisitions that you just talked about. Then you need to look at what should happen, mapping that to policy. Should these things even have a relationship? Mapping that to policy at scale, and then turning around and say, actually, now I want to take control. Very difficult. So the security organizations, where to your point, you're right. There's so much power, and particularly through digital transformation, has gone to the consumer business units. I'm going to the cloud, like it or not, and it's all changing. But the security organizations, trying to stay out of the headlines, right? And so they've got to make sure they can see what is happening, and trying to do that in a simple way, because everybody's under cost constraints. Over the next 2 years, operational excellence, for the security teams, is going to be another topic that we'll be talking about.
Yeah, it's a bit of kind of the whack-a-mole, right? You can't control it all, truly control it.
Right.
It's changing out from under you. So at the same time, you need a way of understanding what it is, where it is, what's happening.
Yeah, and proximity to a problem, right? So I mean, if you actually understood relationships, you can say what application, which workload is behind a firewall, which one is not. So then you could work out your prioritization of patching and things like that. If it's all just straight logs and static information, you don't know what's talking to what in the frequency and the volume of those communications.
I want to explore more. Tell us more about, so once you have that kind of information, once you've got that interconnection of relationships and how those things are tied together, what can you do, what should you do?
Well, loads of things. I'll give you a great example. We work with a very large Fortune 500 retailer, and they're across everything, right? So they have CrowdStrike, they have Splunk, they have Azure, they have AWS. They're like Frankenstein, right? Everybody has a little bit of everything. So you suck all the value out, and you can see all the relationships, all dependencies. We see things like a Toshiba print server waking up every day and go like, does anybody want to print? Touching every single thing. The CMDB, in this case it was a Cherwell CMDB that was out of date. And there's these things marked in the CMDB that was like marked that they're already decommissioned, but they were still communicating. So you talk to them and you say, hey, these are still communicating. They're like, yeah, let me go check. They come back, that's our SAP estate. Don't turn that off. It ships garments all over the world. I mean, so the insight that you can get by actually understanding it, and particularly in the modern world, at some point you have a container, and the other point you have a mainframe, and these all things kind of interact in some way, and certainly have a dependency. You can do many more. You can reduce your risk. You can lock things down, but your organization has much more insight on what it should be doing.
Making informed decisions, right?
Yeah.
Before I shut down the
SAP before I shut down the SAP service, maybe I should make sure that that's not the right thing to do.
Update your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
Get out on.
Get ready for Congress, because you're going to be in front of Congress.
Right. Exactly.
That's harsh.
We're having fun here. So tell me some more about RSA and your take on kind of what's happening here. What are some takeaways you're garnering from this year?
So I've been coming to RSA since about 2002, so 20 years, just about right?
Same for me, yeah.
And I've thrown a party on a Monday night ever since then as well. The fun thing about RSA this year in particular is everybody's back. I mean, I was at the Goldman Sachs party on Monday night at the press club, and my friend Ward runs the IB stuff there. I'm like, Ward, are you normally this popular? And he was like, yeah, it's crazy busy. It's just packed. And it's nice to see people back. They're engaging and they're leaning in, and they want to solve problems. And it's, but at every single event that I've been at over the last 2 days now, 2.5 days, I guess, it's just slammed.
You can't get in a restaurant or
can't get in a restaurant.
Get a table.
Yeah, you can't get in a restaurant. Can't get anything anywhere. It's crazy.
So a couple of themes of RSA you can kind of pick out. Zero trust is one.
Sure.
Application security, API security.
Yeah.
Things like what's sort of a vArmor take on those topics? How does that fit with you?
Yeah, we're big fans of zero trust. I mean, every time Biden comes out and says we need zero trust, it creates conversations with customers, but also it starts to solve problems for them. So the way we look at zero trust is kind of like there's two parts to zero trust. Like outside in, people like Zscaler do an amazing job of that, and we love Jay Sharder and the people over there. But also, we do it from the inside out, and you should do both in order to secure the enterprise. So we actually can see the reality of what actually is going on between applications and workloads and data flows and everything else, and map that across your estate. So you need to understand that in order to really understand zero trust. But that in combination with the people that do it from the device and the user in. Mm-hmm. So two sides of the coin. It's a journey, right? You should always start with discovering what is happening. Otherwise, you have no idea, what should. Mm-hmm. So in both cases with Jay and Zscaler and and companies like that, you should always start with discovery, but then move into monitoring and then move into control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a big topic around that too is things like cloud native microservices, the new kinds of contemporary software architectures where they're very API centric, reliant API first. It's an approach that's called that. Now you're talking about data shipping around in more kind of not public API. Well, you don't know. They may be public, could be public, private, internal, external. That's got to create a whole new kind of fabric of relationships for you to start.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you look at the growth of the APIs and the forecasted growth of the APIs. It's just massive. But that's an attack surface that is just out there. And, some of those things, will keep you awake at night if you actually really understood how bad it could get.
Maybe you don't want to know. Well, we decided that wasn't a good strategy long ago. But
yeah, exactly.
Well, Tim, it's great talking with you.
Yeah, fantastic. Have a chat.
Congratulations on being back and in person.
Yeah, it's been an amazing reunion, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So where can folks find out more about vArmor? Check out what you're doing.
Yeah, it's vArmor.com. Come and learn about relationships and how they matter to you and how they should matter to the enterprise. And relationships and dependencies are critical to understanding and securing your enterprise.
Great. Tim Eads, CEO with vArmor. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Nabil Bukhari, who's the Chief Product Officer and Chief Technology Officer for Extreme Networks. And we're talking about some cool stuff in the form of digital twins for networks. Hey Nabil, welcome to the show.
Mike, thank you for having me. Really appreciate that.
On the face of it, this seems like almost an intuitively obvious thing to do, but I'm sure it wasn't easy. So how did you guys go about building digital twins for networks, and what are the implications?
Yeah, so great question, Mike. And look, I mean, digital twin is something that has been around for a little while, actually a long while in multiple different verticals. Manufacturing comes to mind, aerospace, they've been using it for engine development, like for, like 15 years. But to your point, it seems very intuitive that why on earth would we not have that for networks up till now? We have had simulators for network for like about 20 years, but simulators are not the same thing. So one of the key differences between a simulator and a digital twin is simulator simulates a device. And if, let's say, for example, you find a problem or you don't find a problem in a simulation, that has no direct correspondence to whether you will find that in the actual code or not, because it's just simulating it. It's not the same code. And that's one of the big issues with simulation. So we kind of looked at it and we said, like, look, this digital twin technology has been around for a little while. Nobody has done it for networking, but I think it lends itself really well to networking. So we kind of pulled it in. And we not only just pulled it in, we actually put it in the cloud, which makes it super, super easy. Because some people were like, oh, well, you can set up a rack of servers and make network digital twins on it. So I was like, okay, so instead of racking and stacking network devices, now you're racking and stacking servers. So, what's the point? So putting it into the network really makes it super simple, where with a click of a button, you can create a digital twin of as many devices and as many different kinds of devices as you want in the cloud. And you can do all of your verification, testing, staging, or whatever else you want to do it right there in the cloud. And when you're happy, click the button, and that whole environment translates and goes into your production. So it's really as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. So can I also use that to track deviations in my environment? So I can take a snapshot of maybe my network and compare it to the digital twin and say, hey, look at all the things that have changed since the last time that we did this. And maybe some of those things are unauthorized.
Absolutely, you can. I mean, like, that is a capability that we have had in XIQ for many years now. We call it, variation and divergence from your golden config. And a lot of our customers use that for compliance, sometimes internal compliance, sometimes external compliance, like especially if you're in an industry that has these external compliances like healthcare and so on and so forth. So that capability already exists. But to your point, digital twin allows you to take it to an entirely new level, because not only can you see the drift in your configs, you can actually see the drift in the state of your entire network, which allows you to kind of predict and sense way deeper issues in your network than just looking at the drift and the config. So think about it this way, that compliance, that drift checking that was only at config level, now we have brought it down to the code level. And it just enhances your ability to secure your entire enterprise.
Do you think we'll use this capability beyond networks? I mean, it seems like it lends itself to all kinds of interesting infrastructure and application environments. So what are your future ambitions?
So that's a great question, Mike. Look, I mean, whenever we introduce technologies like this, we typically have a specific use case in mind just at the very start of it. So think about when we brought out this digital twin capabilities for our network devices, the first use case right now that some of our customers are already, piloting with us or POCing with us or in beta with us, that's mostly around staging and verification. So what's that use case? Most of the times when you're deploying large networks, or any networks of that kind, you want to stage it first, you rack and stack it, you bring it up, you verify it, you create that, golden config, and then only you go deploying that. So we have taken that entire stage and put it into the cloud, so reducing complexity, reducing cost, saving time, and so on and so forth. But that's just the first use case. To your point, there's so many other use cases. I actually believe that we'll get to a point where it will not just be staging, but it will be essentially looking at the real-time state of the entire network globally, wherever you are. Now, you have heard us talk about infinite enterprise, which is the idea that, look, in the post-pandemic world, networks are becoming more and more distributed because enterprises have to reach their consumers, be it workers, be it shoppers, be it patients and clinicians or students or whoever their consumers are. They have to reach them wherever they are. And that results in an infinitely distributed enterprise. Now, the thing with an infinitely distributed enterprise is that they're very complex by nature, right? So having technologies like digital twin allows you to keep a handle on that. By using the power of AI and ML and digital twin in the background, you can model, you can stage, you can verify, and you can keep an eye on it, and you can do predictive analysis on these broad networks, essentially from the cloud. So that's where I feel that this goes forward. In technologies like digital twin and technologies like AI ops, like Copilot from our side, and the power of the cloud, they will come together to make infinite enterprise possible, and at the same time, reduce complexity and reduce cost, because that's the biggest hurdle to deployment of technology today. That's the operational complexity and operational cost.
To drive that point home just a little bit, so how does the twin, if I make a change in the twin, how does that manifest itself out to the physical environment per se? And how does it know exactly what to execute?
So again, a brilliant question. So how do they stay in sync? Now, the beauty of having our entire portfolio managed from the cloud is that it actually allows us to do something like that. So the entire network, be it our switches or APs or soon to be SD-WAN or routers or whatever you have, they're all connected and managed to the cloud. So the cloud actually maintains a sync between the digital twin as well as the production network. Now, when you make changes to the digital twin, the idea is that you only make them to digital twin and you see how the network behaves and what the consequences are and whether it gives you the outcome that you want. You tweak it to your heart's content until you're comfortable and you're confident. You said, this is exactly what I want. And then you click a button and the cloud actually makes all of the changes that are in digital twin. They replicate them on the production and bring them back into sync. So it's succinctly saying that the reason how it has happened or the way it happens is really the fact that everything that we do is in that cloud, and that makes it possible. Now, it will be absolutely I don't want to say impossible, nothing's impossible, but it would be extremely technically costly and operationally complex to create a digital twin in the cloud of a device that is managed on-prem or managed by a different system. And so that's why putting everything in the cloud was the first step. And now that we have put everything in the cloud, now we are adding these kind of capabilities. We came out unlimited data retention, I think like 18 months ago. We came out with Copilot, which is AI ops and predictive analysis and all that kind of stuff last year. And now we are as in digital twin. So now we are really bringing in that power of one network in one cloud, and then what is possible with that.
How hard is it to set this up? I think a lot of people have it in their heads that digital twins require, data scientists and all kinds of folks. So have we reached a point where this is just becoming accessible to the average IT organization?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just as simple as you go into XIQ and then there's a button that allows you to create a device, tell you what kind of device, and boom, the device comes up. And the moment it comes up, it actually shows up in the same environment in which your physical network comes together. So it behaves exactly like a physical device. So everything that you're already used to doing on a physical device, you can do it on it, and creating is as simple as clicking a button.
Okay. Do you think, therefore, we're approaching some ability to manage IT infrastructure at a new level of scale that we haven't had before? And as a result, maybe we don't need, armies and armies of IT people. We'll still need a few folks to kind of manage things, but each individual IT team could manage things at a much higher level of scale.
Yes, because I don't want to say that, the purpose of the technology is to, people lose their jobs, because obviously that is not the purpose of technology. But the technology like digital twins, technology like AI ops, they are really there to complement and make your existing IT people or team more effective. So the way I think about it is there are multiple things that are happening out there. So one thing, as I talked about, networks are becoming infinitely distributed. That means that instead of having 3 campuses, now you have 30,000 branches. Like everybody's home is a branch. That's the typical environment. If you look at school systems, now you're not only maintaining the experience of a student when they're studying in school, but now with digital hybrid curriculums, you also need to figure out what is their experience when they go home and when they move between home and school. Similarly, in healthcare, I don't think I'm ever going back to, talking to my doctor, walking into a physical, doctor office any longer. I'm probably going to do it on digital video like I'm talking to you. But that part is actually easy. The more difficult part is that my doctor, who's also probably sitting at his or her home, needs access to my digital medical records at the same speed and with the same security as if they were sitting in the hospital. So the idea there is that Networks are more proliferated. They are the bedrock of everything that we do in society. So therefore, the IT teams already are overstretched and they have to do a lot more. That's the problem statement, right? That's the problem statement of operational complexity and operational costs. With tools like AIOps, Copilot, as well as Digital Twin, what they do is that they allow that IT team of either 5 people or 50 people, depending on whatever that scale is, to be effective on a way broader scale. So in a certain way, it allows the IT teams to scale to the needs of the infinite enterprise. So I think that's the way we look at it. I always think about it as that rather than lesser number of people doing the same amount of thing, it is the same number of people being able to do a lot more, right? Because that's really what the need of the modern enterprise is.
Do you think the roles will converge more? I mean, historically, we've had all these silos where there's a network team and a compute team and storage teams and application teams. But as we kind of go forward here, it looks like we might be able to, at the very least, blur more of the roles and people won't be so tied up in like one specific task. Do you think that the roles are going to change?
Oh, absolutely. And Mike, that has been happening, I think, for the last 10 years. I think you and I both remember the days where even in networking, there used to be a team that was only related to the WAN technologies. And then there were only wireless teams, and there were like the LAN teams, and there were data center teams. And if you look around in the customers, now that is not the norm, but that's the exception. And typically you just have one network team that takes care of your network no matter where the network goes. And I believe that as we move forward, the same will happen. It'll continue to happen, and more the roles will converge. And I view it that in the end, the definition of the network is changing. So the people that maintain it, their roles are changing. And in the end, a network operator, if you really think about it, what are they really doing and what are they really responsible for? They are really responsible for connecting people, devices, and application, no matter where these three are, whether in the campuses or the data center or SaaS clouds or my home, your home, coffee shop, standing in line to board a plane. These are all places where people, devices, and applications are present. And the first goal of the network is to connect them securely. Number two is that as we distribute these applications, to maintain the experience, right? So I really think that in the end, all of these roles will combine together with the purpose of securely connecting people, devices, and applications and maintaining the experience. Now, what would we call them? I'll leave that to the imagination of HR departments around the globe. I'm sure they'll come up with a very fancy title for this kind of a role. Yeah.
All right. So what's your best advice to IT people as you kind of look at this new landscape? And we're having a virtual conversation here, but reality is the entire IT environment is kind of virtual. So what should they be thinking about? How should they go forward?
My advice, and I don't have the hubris to tell them exactly what to do it, so I'll just share with them what I feel would work. I would say the first thing is to really let it sink in that the post-pandemic world is different than the pre-pandemic world, and really starts from the consumer behavior. Even IT people, we all have our roles in a company, but we are consumers in our private lives as well. We go to the doctor office, we buy stuff, our kids go to school, or we go to school, and we get healthcare services or government services and stuff. Look at that and see how our behaviors have changed as consumers. And you will find that we don't live our lives the same way we used to in a pre-pandemic world. Now, if consumers change, that means businesses have to change because they have to cater to a different expectation from the consumer. When businesses have to change, that means technology has to change, because today, in today's world, technology is the bedrock of every business. No matter what you do, whether you build shoes or satellites, technology is the bedrock of that business. So that's the chain of events. Once we realize that, then we think that, okay, what is success like in this post-pandemic world? And what tools are available to me? A tool that probably in a pre-pandemic world could have threatened your job, as we talked about before, robotics and AI that will take away jobs. Well, maybe that was the case in pre-pandemic world, but in a post-pandemic world, these tools are there to allow you to scale to the requirements of your job. So I think that's really an open mind. These tools are there to help you. Companies like ourselves at Extreme, we are hyper-focused on making your experience better so that you can deliver that experience to your consumers. There's a lot of technology out there, but look at technology, but always remember, try to take out as much complexity and cost from it, because technology proliferation is not good either, right? So technology for the sake of experience within the cost and complexity envelope. I would say that is something that if people keep that in front of them, I believe we'll all be better off for that. And the latest technology will improve the human condition broadly across every aspect of society.
Great. Hey, Nabil, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike. As always, it's always wonderful to talk to you at any time.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecops, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Okay, hope you enjoyed all of the great content today on Techstrong TV. We will be back Thursday with fresh content. I think we're going to have a Techstrong TV Today segment where we'll be talking about news of the week and a good discussion. Stay tuned for that. But until then, be safe, be strong, be Techstrong.